That's the sexy Greg Rust that I wanted to hear the first time around. All right, so we're with an actual professional in the studio today.
Can we do a deep ballsy voiceover off? Because I reckon you are way better than me.
What, with the deep voice?
Listen to that. I try to do that. I wish I could do it.
What did I do that the other day? Was the go G or
G or
we're in like a cab.
It's not the dart. It's not the dart.
That's the one. Yeah, I wondered what the rest of it was.
Shannon's. That's actually one of their commercials from way back. Yeah,
you do some stuff with Shannon's, wouldn't you?
I do a little bit of stuff. They've been good. We're podcast rivals, but we're having a nice convo here. They've been a bit of a supporter over time for lots of different things. Actually, that long time ago on RPM when I worked at Network 10. And then more recently, I've been working on the Shannon series, with TCR and other categories around the country. So,
yeah, sweet. Well, yeah, I've been a big fan for a long time.
Don't subject yourself to too much of that.
That's how I feel with the same. That's how I feel on this end now. Like I always joke, I feel like everyone that listens to this podcast is just waiting to figure out I'm actually a wanker.
No, not at all. Don't you reckon it's about just however you get there? Like I enjoy one-on-one conversations like this. But it's just the storytelling. It's a couple of people said to me, podcasting, and I said, but it's not an interview. It kind of is, and you ask questions and that sort of stuff. But invariably, it's just conversational, and people really enjoy that. And it's gone through, for whatever reason, you know this better than me because you got way more episodes. But it's sort of, what do you reckon, mate? Like 2014, 2015, it just sort of started doing that, didn't it?
Well, the crazy thing, and this is why when you were saying like you basically do this full time. So when I come back from America, I was like, I'm just going to go in on this. I didn't have any ties here. I'd had to move out of my house in America, my cars, everything that I did. Like I basically had a life there and then severed that. But
didn't you do some stuff there which gave you a taste? So that gave you...
Yeah, it was a crazy experience of what I got to do over there. But what it did do was, it was just like this perfect timing to where I had some money saved up. I had all my equipment. I went back to live at my parents, which I was stoked on because I hadn't seen him for 8 years, basically. And then it gave me a chance to just do the podcast thing full time without any kind of crazy overheads.
But don't you reckon that sacrifice is a great thing in any story like this? So
sure.
we sit here now, mate. Your studio's mega, and it's obviously been quite a path to get to this point. You know?
And I think that the thing that was cool with me is, so living over there, I watched the podcast industry in America grow. And America's always, from what I've could kind of tell with music, motocross, film, whatever, it's always like this 6 or 7 year cycle ahead. So I feel like I watched the podcasting thing happen to the fullest effect, to where it's like millions and millions of people each episode on like Joe Rogan podcast. Like I probably started listening to Rogan at episode 100 and something.
Amazing. Okay.
And today it's like 1400, 1500. So to see that, and then when I come home and I would talk about these podcasts that I would listen to, nobody was across it. And then when I started the podcast through, like I was just saying, through my buddy at Red Bull, I was just like, man, I actually have a chance to be first to market at something. And that's why I was like, you know what, I'm not going to chase the film thing. I'm not going to chase anything. I'll just do this full time.
Pioneer here.
And see what happens, because what you're saying, you're right. Like 2014, 2015, it exploded here. But that was 07, 08 in America.
Amazing.
Yeah, so to sort of see that.
And don't you reckon now too that the demographics are shifting too? So, you get messages, hey, my dad's not real au fait with podcasts, but I got him set up now. He can listen to you in the truck when he's driving around. And that's when you start doing that. That's very cool.
Well, I think too what's crazy is that we've lost with media. We've gone shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. Everything that we've done has gone, it's like been so reduced down to like these crazy small attention spans. Yet on my podcast analytics, my average listener time is 2 hours and 48 minutes.
Mega.
So it's like, well, there is an appetite there. And I think that podcasts hit on some form of like primal deal to where it's like, I call it the campfire effect. So it's like there's no distractions, where 2,000 years ago, there's not really much going on. There's no electronics. There's nothing like that. What you have at the end of a day without electricity and all that shit is a campfire and stories or dance and I think that there's something that we're just never going to lose, that storytelling type of scenario. And I think that that's what's made the whole podcasting thing so big.
I would agree with you. And even to give you an example, so one of the most popular in the Rusty's Garage library is with Mark Larkin, who is, a legend in the supercars pit lane. He's brilliant at what he does. And when I went to do the podcast with him, he got his Polaris out, he got a 6-pack of beers and put them in a little thing, and we drove out into the bush.
Amazing.
Parked up. No more driving after that, obviously. Just parked up on a couple of logs and just chewed the fat over a Corona or two. And it was just, there's no campfire, but it was more or less like that.
Yeah. It's amazing that I think we have that in us, and I think that why it's so successful now is because we lost our craving for that, or we lost our understanding that was something that was vital to us. And I just think that there's a real purity, and I'm sure you'd know as well, like I've made great friends out of this podcast that, we do them for 3 hours. We're strangers until you walk in, and then you get thrust into this environment of headphones on, we're recording. Back the layers and you just sort of go. And I've made amazing friends out of this now, and it's I think it's because sometimes in 3 hours, like, you meet a new person, and let's say V8 Supercar pit lane or whatever, and you meet them and you have a good 5-minute combo, and then, oh shit, I've got to get back to the TV truck, and we'll catch up for a beer at the hotel, and then maybe 20 minutes of conversation there. So you've got this new person that over the weekend it's 25 minutes. Then you might see him 3 weeks later, you don't really catch up at that round. Then another 3 weeks goes by, and then you see him again. So like, your conversation as a friend, it's like takes so long to get to like a 3 hour mark,
and to get the standard veneer to drop, because they're in media mode. So to get to the point where it is just conversational like this might take a bit to get there. But I love your point about the shift insofar as, what do they reckon now? You've got 7 seconds with most digital content to get the audience. 7 seconds, and that's probably even quite a long.
I'd say 2.
There you go.
Yeah.
But yet you can hold them for 2 hours. That's awesome, mate.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and you would have noticed that, I'm sure, with some of your guests, that you would have developed a much more deeper and meaningful connection through just doing the podcast.
Most definitely. You having rapport to begin with, I reckon, helps.
Yeah, 100%.
And very fortunate over time that the career and the various different things that I've done helps with either introductions or getting the go ahead to do something like that.
Yeah, people are aware of you before they.
Yeah, and I think you'd like to hope that what you've done in the past gives a level of trust, and probably the thing I love about it the most in the bite-sized conversations that you're talking about. Typically we're trying to, in general media land, you're trying to generate a headline, you're trying to do something that is got a slant to it, or I hate that. The fact that this can just be a conversation, it can just be you in your own words. And from my side, okay, other people might pick it up and discuss it or zero in on one aspect of it, but the fact that it's one long conversation, it's in their own words, I think that's tremendous. Yeah.
I think with that as well, there's a certain like a complex idea or a difficult perspective can take more than the time that you've got allotted. And I think that definitely when you're working in the world of athletes, where it is, unfortunately, it's like, you get why. It's, you can say, unfortunately, it has a slant to it, but it's like, it kind of needs to. Like, what we're turning on the TV to be entertained, essentially, where race car drivers are entertainers. And it's like, the storylines that are created, I think, is what has made V8 Supercars so successful. But those kind of, the kind of questions that you can ask, the time that you get for answers, it's just not conducive.
It's not a forum like this.
Exactly. Yeah. And, I'm excited to listen to your Casey Stoner podcast, because, to listen to a guy like that famously doesn't do interviews, it will be fascinating to hear him in his own words without any setup to sort of push towards a certain narrative. You've got a producer in an earpiece or whatever. It's
and that's exactly what it was like. We kind of sat like you and I are now, and shot the breeze about all different aspects of his career. And there were things that came out of the conversation about his current battle with chronic fatigue that I didn't know about, and nor did I think going in that we would talk about that. So yeah, I mean, chuffed that he felt comfortable enough to open up about it. But you know, full respect to him, it was something he felt he needed to discuss with his fans, and I'm pleased that a podcast who's ever gave him the opportunity to do that without time restraints, without you know, the person coming in with an objective or a slant. And that was. Yeah, very proud of that. Yeah.
Where did the idea for the Rusty's Garage come from?
Ironically, in about September 2017, I went through a pretty significant life change. I was coming to the end of a second contract with Supercars. I'd had a really special tenure with Channel 10 that went from the late 90s up until 2006, and that's a chapter I cherish even to this day. And then another more recent reconnection with them, where I went from sort of end of 2014 through to 17. Anyway, we were living in Sydney, my wife and I, and kids at the time. She's a Kiwi. We kind of flipped life on its head. We live there now. I come and go I do work on both sides.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. I thought that you were still based here.
No. So that's I know Ben Townley. Ironically, I'm deviating from your question here, but
that's fine. We can do that all day.
He used to live across the road from one of my wife's best friends, and so we were visiting at one stage, and she said, there's a guy across the road, you might know him from dirt bikes, and you want to go and have a beer, and next thing I'm at Ben Townley's place having a beer, and
isn't he the best dude ever?
Great bloke, mate, ripping, very genuine human being, great nature.
Also his 40th birthday yesterday.
Yeah, mega. Happy birthday, mate. Yeah. So long story short, I flipped life on its head, and at about the midpoint of 17, I was very committed to trying to do different things that. I have two daughters. My wife and I. They're 13 and 11. They're not going to be massive motor racing fans, but they know what Dad does and what I'm involved in. But I wanted to play in spaces that I thought were more relevant to them, more digital content that
that's cool.
Yeah, either YouTube based or whatever. And podcasting was another big thing for me. So late to the party compared to America. But
that was right at the wave here,
yeah,
though.
Correct.
Like that's right at the start.
And even if you wanted to drill it down to an automotive / motorsports slant, it was sort of pioneering in Australia in that sense.
Yeah.
So we workshopped it. I work with a company that has a big library in the United States, and they'd set up here in Australia in
who is that podcast one?
So podcast one. So they're a part of the. Your listeners will know Triple M and Fox FM. They're all under that umbrella. And anyway, we workshop different ideas. Molly Taylor, who's been an Australian rally champion, she was my first ever podcast, and it was a test really to see what it looked and sounded like. And we shot the breeze for a good couple of hours. And then we pulled it all apart and without her, with the team there, and said this worked, that didn't work, blah blah blah. And I actually went back and recorded it again in a workshop. Her family have a deep connection with rallying in Australia.
Yep.
And her dad's got all sorts of different cool cars. And so we went to the workshop this time rather than being in studio, and sat around the cars and talked cars and other bits and pieces. And it grew from there. It has had a racer slant because I love that. But we've also done Shane Jacobson, for example, and people like that are proper fans of cars or bikes, in his case both. And so it's automotive.
It's got an automotive soul, but that's not restricted to.
You got it. And it's funny at the beginning when we were figuring out what we wanted it to sort of look and feel like. You invariably come back to a key bike, a key car, or something like that. But as it's evolved, it's very much the human side too. I've loved, and you've done this so well, mate. It's about unmasking the athlete that spends, the broadcasts of Supercross, of supercars, of whatever, do such an amazing job of telling the story of the contest, of decoding the technical aspects because we're in a technical game.
Yeah.
But I love the notion of the fact that what is the story behind Ben Townley? What is the story behind Chad Reed? What is the story behind Casey Stoner? And trying to get people to know a bit more about them in connection with, a couple of key bikes or cars or things that were significant in that story.
Yeah. So you worked out the sort of a way that you wanted to run the podcast in terms of a structure, kind of
to an extent,
a loose structure.
A loose structure. You'd like anything in the media, and you've played in all sorts of different aspects of it. Getting too formulaic is it can be good.
It stifles creativity,
but it
though.
Does,
if you go too.
And so you have to be adept at changing it up and what have you. So we knew that one-on-one style conversation was what we wanted to do. Others have gone and done panel conversations and debate-based stuff, and some of it is in other podcasts is about what's currently happening, and we didn't want to do that. We wanted stuff to not get too short in its shelf life. We wanted it to have in 2 years' time that you could still go back and enjoy it. So for me, it was very much about the conversation. It was about unmasking the athlete and trying to get back to the thing that would connect with the audience. And that is it may have been their first car, their first bike, a restoration story, whatever, as well as the champion moment or the story of heartbreak or whatever it might be, and away it went. Yeah.
And how much research are you doing before each pod? Obviously, you are a fucking encyclopedia of motorsport in ways anyway, though,
like, you love it. So I have a pretty good photographic memory. I it's not perfect, but it's very good from a moment point of view. So I could fast forward 2 years, I might remember that I've come in here and your dog's in here with us, and there's stuff like that'll be banked away, and maybe some stuff we laughed about. And so in getting them to open up about some conversations or things that people may not have heard before,
you're tapping into that.
A lot of it I've gone back and revisited as well. I don't want to get bogged down too much on stats, because I think you can find all that stuff, but I do want it to trigger conversation. You know, if someone's won 6 in a row at Phillip Island or whatever it might be, and there's things that
that makes sense.
You do want that stuff to come forth, and significant moments, as I said before. But it's also the backstories. It's also things that I've witnessed along the way that I think are okay to talk about now or palatable now. Or
because in the heat of the moment, like if Fabian come on your podcast 2 weeks after Bathurst, probably not going to get the same responses in 10 years' time talking about, because there is that passage of time can create a different version of the event.
And maybe you've experienced this. Some guys have said to me, no, not yet. I see the podcast as something in post-race life. I'm still doing my thing. I'm still building my story. I'm not ready to do that yet, So... timings. There's been moments where I've had stuff teed up with different people, and then hey, obviously now is not a good time. Can we push it back? And that's fine. I'd rather them be comfortable where they can open up about it. And okay, you got to ask a hard question sometimes, but you hope that your balanced take on things, your rapport with them, will get it to the point where you can have that conversation and still express what fans or listeners might be thinking, but still getting back to the fact that it's their chance. It's they can open up, and I'm not sitting here trimming it all up and getting an angle I want. I want to hear what they have to say. Yeah, definitely. Chad Reed actually, I don't know that many people know this, but I had to cut like 40 minutes of our episode out. Oh wow. Yeah, because he just wasn't. It was talking about some family stuff. Okay. And we got super deep on it, and then I purposely actually sat on it for like a week or two. Yep. I was really eager to put that out, obviously, because I was like, this is probably going to be one of my best episodes. Yep. But I could tell during it and while he was talking about it that it was fucking heavy. And so I sat on it, and then I saw him in New Zealand for the Supercross. This was last year for the race. Did you run it by him? Yeah, and then I just said, he's like, oh, when are you going to put that podcast out? And I was like, oh, I just wanted to see where you're at and if you're okay with everything that was in it. And then he's like, you know what, I sort of actually do want to take out the just that bit. He's like, I'm respect though both you and him for doing that. I think that's important too. people listening to your podcast now might think, but it would have been good to hear that, and it would have been.
It was fucking incredible, and I know that it would have been a huge thing, but that's his story, that's his thing to tell, and if he wanted to do that through me, that's fine. If he doesn't, that's fine. And I think that was an important moment in my podcast, I guess the arc of this whole thing as well, is because I have always said to people, man, if you want to come on here and talk about your fucking cats and how they do funny stuff and you put it on YouTube. I don't know
cats, by the way.
But it's cool, that if this is, I have always seen this thing as this is the guest thing. And it's you get to come on here and we get to talk about you. I'm interested in the guests, and it's I don't want this to turn into a fishing kind of thing. I'd rather lose something that would have done well, it would have done well, but it's that's not my story to tell.
And mate, who's to say that in years to come, when he's finished four-wheel racing or whatever it might be, that he doesn't want to sit down and come out with that then?
And that's and that is the thing, that it's I guess you've got to, that's it really shouldn't come into it. It's just a pure respect thing. But you're right, that could come down into play sort of later in the track,
To your point, I did one this year with an Australian guy called Michael Massey, who is now the race director in Formula One. So he's an Aussie guy, kind of working behind the scenes, but with a very, very important, very high pressure role in F1, which, as you know, is rich in history, intensely political. In four-wheel terms, the top echelon.
That's the upper echelon, for sure.
Exactly. So we did the podcast, and we agreed that it needed to be run by the governing body, the FIA, and they had to rubber stamp it all. They wanted one tiny little thing removed, which I was completely okay with. And same deal as you. For me, I've known Michael for years, since he was, really young, working, his first job straight out of high school in motor racing. He's a guy that's ultra passionate about it and has made it his life. And I just didn't see the point in, for the sake of one little thing.
Headline.
It's his story. He's comfortable with it without that, and so was the governing body. And no problem, no dramas. I typically don't edit them, but I've always got respect for the guest. But if the guest wants to do that, no problem.
Well, it was actually not a similar thing, but when Tim Edwards come on the podcast, he's just one of the good old boys.
Great boy.
We were telling crazy stories, and he's swearing and telling the Bathurst story right after Bathurst. And he's like, I sort of don't really want to talk about Bathurst. And then it just come up. And I didn't even watch the race, to be brutally honest. So I was just curious from a position of a person that didn't. I was like, so what even fucking happened? Why is everyone blowing up? I think I was at a jiu-jitsu comp or something. And
did you do martial arts?
Yeah.
What so jiu-jitsu? Or what level?
Blue belt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mate, I'm seriously out of shape, and it's something that is actually on my 2020 to-do list.
Wow.
But I have a black belt in Taekwondo from I haven't sort of practiced or trained for probably 6 or 7 years now, and I really want to get back to it. And my wife is a first dan black belt, and I love
in Taekwondo,
and she trained in Korea, and I really want to get back to that, mate. So anyway, we're digressing here.
No, I did Taekwondo my whole life as a kid.
Really?
Yeah, and then went away from it when I was 15 or 16. Feel like I'd sort of done a lot in that space. I did a lot of competitions. I was doing a lot of exhibition stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I really got into it. And then after a while, just school, I actually got more into boxing and stuff like that.
Yep.
And then I 2 years ago got into jiu-jitsu.
Good stuff.
And I'm just
a more traditional or a Brazilian or what is it? Brazilian.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I've got my coach doing in Mermaid Beach. Mm-hmm. He's a 4th degree black belt from Brazil, young dude, super cool, 120 kilo monster. I've been going. I won 2 national titles this year.
Congratulations! That's awesome. That's awesome.
So I'm full on. Yeah, love it. It's definitely been been a part of everything that I've sort of done to not transform, but my life's just different. I moved back home and I stopped. I didn't ride motocross as much, and I started doing the jiu-jitsu thing and. Yeah, so it just sort of
that's awesome, mate.
Went ham into it.
My instructor back in Sydney, he was an older guy, Greg Wiley. He was excellent, and he was big on always kind of opening the blinkers to what other arts had to offer. So while Taekwondo was his thing, and I can't remember how many, I reckon he's a 6th Dan, but anyway, but he would always, every second class we did, there'd be something like, I work with this guy in Kung Fu or whatever, and we'd try a few different things to always understand what that art did.
Yeah. Have you ever done any jiu-jitsu stuff?
No, never. No.
Yeah, okay. If you want to get in shape, then it's phenomenal. Like when I did the Ben Townley thing, did you see I did the tour with BT? Yeah. I did a 40-minute moto.
And you felt fresh?
Oh, it's fine. My hand started bleeding, so I had to stop. But I struggled with fitness my whole life as a when I raced motocross. Yeah. And I didn't really train. I just wanted to ride, but I don't know whether it was like the heat up home, but I just could never put in like the amount of time to get fit enough to do the motos the way I wanted to do them. And then started doing jiu-jitsu because I got arm pump real bad. So it was like debilitating pretty much. Started doing jiu-jitsu and the grips with the gi and stuff like that. And now I do all the trans motos 6 hours and 8 hours and I never get arm pump.
And how good is the mental side? That's the side I enjoy too. It's good. Reedy's kids are into it too, aren't they? Are they jiu-jitsu? What are they into?
So we spoke about it on the podcast and he ended up taking the kids to do jiu-jitsu, and I'd talk with Ellie and that about it, and they're just
they're loving it,
fully into it. Yeah, so it's honestly it's a superpower. Like it's a crazy. I mean, I don't like to fight people.
Neither do I. I haven't got an angry. That's not me either, mate. I'd rather. I'm the most non-confrontational person ever. But it is they're great arts, I think.
Yeah, to know that you've got the ability. Like I almost feel bad for people now. Like if somebody would, try to start. We had a dude in the casino in Auckland last year. It was like 4 a.m. and we were staying up because everyone flew out at like 5 a.m. So we're like, we're just going to stay up and then sleep on the plane, sort of deal. And these guys were trying to take photos of like Chad and Dean and all the boys. And I was just like, mate, come on. Like it's 4 a.m. A1's just around the corner. Yeah. We really can't be doing, selfies at a casino in Auckland. And one guy sort of like was pushing me and I was like, mate, this isn't a good idea. Yeah. Like this is a really terrible idea. Yeah. And I didn't feel threatened at all. And it was a crazy feeling to just be that calm, that level-headed when somebody's like
that's good
pushing you around. And I'm like, mate, this is a super bad idea for you. Like you cannot be doing this. This isn't.
That's better than a fight or flight sort of scenario.
Because I think that's a lot of the problems that people have when they're in that situation. They don't know how to react, and it's like a back to the wall kind of scenario. But if you don't feel like that, then you can.
And I think there's always a better way to resolve it. Always.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's super cool then that you did that. Yeah. Man, I'd love for you to try it. Like, and there's because whereabouts are you?
I'm east coast of the North Island, so.
Are you close to where the Townleys are now?
No, we're only a couple of hours from them. I haven't seen them. I saw obviously BT at the NZ round last year, Supercross. Yeah. But no, we must catch up with them actually.
Yeah, because he said to me somehow it come up that your name come up while I was at Ben's, and he told me because I think I messaged you saying that Ben was going to be here, but we changed the plans. But and then he told me the story of like he just randomly run into
crazy.
But yeah, you should look into it. It's definitely it's hard. It's like a hard apprenticeship of a few months of. Like you'll just be like, the crazy thing is like, you just don't realize just how helpless you are in like a situation when you're doing just like sport jiu-jitsu against someone that's really good, and then you the first day you're like, you actually feel like a child. And even for me, with my coaches, I feel I'm just a child. Yeah. You've got
that's
absolutely,
how you learn.
But it's quite confronting, and I think a lot of people. You either fall in love straight away like I did. I was like, okay, I just need to do that. I have to figure that out. But I'd love for you to try it, or even next time you're here, I can take you to a class. But it's Tim Edward. That's
Tim Edwards. Yeah. So, how about that? I mean, there's a guy with Formula One experience. Came to Australia and actually did some stuff, I think, on the Commonwealth Games in Melbourne before he got back into motor racing again. But now, on the Motorcycling Australia board, his boys ride. He loves it, mate. He digs it, doesn't he?
Yeah. Well, he's in Vietnam right now on the Vietnam motorcycle tours. Have you ever seen that tour?
I've not been on it, but it's funny. Back in 03, 04, my wife and I trekked to Everest Base Camp.
Oh, wow.
And that's a real, for me, that's one of the, because I'm a bit of a 5-star Freddie when it comes to hotels and things. And she was big on that. She went and did.
Well, she's a Kiwi, right?
She's a Kiwi, yeah. So
That's
she did.
why.
Yeah, correct.
I love that shit.
She went and did Annapurna Circuit and a few other things over there. Anyway, so we trekked to Everest Base Camp, and I have seen a couple of guys. So Malcolm Osler, who's an ex-Formula One, very successful engineer and designer, and more recently Kate Peck, who operates on the.
I know Kate, yeah.
Okay. So both of those guys have done some riding in the Himalayas. You can do that sort of stuff as well. And there's Vietnam, there's another one, and there's some pretty cool rides.
Well, we did that in February last year.
Vietnam,
yeah, and it was just incredible.
And what were you doing? Retracing the Top Gear steps, or what were you doing?
Yeah, that's what it's called the Top Gear Tour. So the guy that owns the company now, who's founded it, is actually a really good friend of ours now.
Okay.
So Dad's done. This will be his 3rd tour.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he just loves it. Yeah. And each time, like this time in February, we're going back and we're going through Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos.
Oh, fantastic.
So we're going to kind of snake the borders.
Over what sort of time frame?
10 days. Yeah, and you're on the bike the whole time. It's not like a touristy thing. Like, it's a legitimate adventure. Yeah. It was a crazy experience. It was honestly way better than I thought it'd be. But Tim, being close with us, our sort of families now through racing and that, he said, look, I'm booking it. I'm gonna go do it. So he's there with Trudy and the two boys.
I love it.
Now.
I love it.
Yeah. So, but he's just a hardcore moto head. Yep. But with to go back to what we were saying there with his podcast, hearing him swearing, being like, then Fav's come over the hill, and I was like, the fuck's going on here? Mm-hmm. And I could have farmed that out pretty easily to supercars to get
the traction,
that kind of quote of him saying something like that. But I almost was just like, I had an email there ready to go, and it was at the GC 600, and I went down and I said, what would the reaction be if I sent out a press release to, the kind of upper people in the supercars and speed cafe and stuff like that? I was like, is that something that do you think that they'd pull that kind of stuff? And he sort of said, yeah. So I was like, cool, we're not doing it. I'm not sending that email. People can find it that follow me, that follow you, but I'm not gonna mine it for.
And then that comes back to, I know it's an overused word, but that comes back to authentic, doesn't it? That's what you want. That's who you are. So,
and I mean, this is a cruisy job, dude. So why do anything that could deter? You know what I mean? I really like doing this. We're on the clock right now, and I'm having an absolute ball.
That's good. That's good with no time constraints.
Yeah. So with your show, how was there an immediate thing of you were like, this is the future? Do you have that feeling still? What is your relationship with it?
I love it immensely. Like anything, it's because you are pushing into a newer space in Australia, in this part of the world. It's it comes with challenges, but like now you have a library, you have a community that is into it, and so on. So it starts to go. Podcasts one are very good at the analytics and the sales side of it. For me, I get an enormous buzz from the conversation. So I don't walk away thinking, perfect, I'm going to generate mega headlines out of that. I couldn't give a shit about that, to be perfectly honest. And some of them have been, and you'll have experienced this too, I reckon, some of them are not necessarily champions with a book full of results and a room full of trophies. They're people who've succeeded or have made it to a very high level, but their record book may not be, and yet they're brilliant storytellers, and they've got a great story about the path to get to there, the challenges they went through, the funny stuff they went through to get there. That's the thing I enjoy most, is letting them tell some of those stories that perhaps haven't been either widely known or fully told. Some of them come just through chats. I mean, some of them, I mentioned Mark Larkin before. I mean, he told some stories that I'd never heard before. But then I find a way to just naturally in the conversation weave stuff together. I can, with him, for example, he used to race a Formula Holden, and where I grew up in Sydney's northwest, his workshop at the time was in the backyard of this house, a couple of blocks from where I grew up. And I would be, either driving to school or something, and I'd always see he was back by Mitre 10 at the time, and I'd always see the blue and yellow Mitre 10 transporter parked down the side.
So you knew where he was.
Yeah. So we relived a bit of that, and then he told me some funny stories about how tough those days were, how he made stuff come together, some funny meetings he went to for sponsorship, and some of the good people that worked behind the scenes with him, some that went on to Formula One and worked for Williams and McLaren and so on. So that's the stuff I enjoy. And as I said before, you don't, in motor racing, sometimes you only...
it's a very results based.
It's the contest, mate, isn't it? And that, like anything, boxing, it's whatever,
natural.
It's natural. We love the contest, but I do love telling some of the funny yarns, the backstories, and I think it humanises it. It makes it more relatable. I mean, Reedy's come from very humble upbringing, and what a great inspirational path he's walked. So to think that maybe a couple of kids might listen and think, "Wow, I can do that. That's possible." That's and you get messages like that. You get people that say, "Hey mate, we're listening tonight. We're in the garage tinkering with the bike, or we're on a road trip somewhere, or." There's a guy in Sydney who runs a go-kart academy, and he helps young kids on the path, and he makes them listen to it.
Yeah, okay.
And see that I find that immensely satisfying. That's really rewarding. I don't like to think of myself as a teacher, but if someone gets something like that out of it, a little nugget out of it, that's great. That's really good.
Yeah, that's been one of the more rewarding things for me. And I think too, like I'm young, like I'm only 31 now, and I started this at 29, I guess, 2 years ago. And I mean, I haven't figured myself all the way out, like 100%. And I think that people nowadays, they're looking for that relatability, because I think that we went through this period in the media, and I know that I made fucking porn for motorcycles. Like now that I think about it, I just made fucking porn. Essentially, there's no, you can't go to the track and shoot that yourself. I was using fucking $300,000 cameras hanging off $1 million helicopters and using lenses that cost $200,000. Like the shit that we would, and it's fucking rad porn, and you can sit and whack off to it for 3 minutes as a petrol head. But at the end of the day, it's not. There's nothing relatable about that at all. And there's a mask on the rider. They're speaking in their most polished, precise, rehearsed. They've said that line 5 times over to get it just right. And I think that there's a disconnect that happens. You can go, fuck, that's amazing. Like, wow, that's special. But I just didn't feel like there was soul to it in a way. And I didn't realize that until I did this.
But one does feed the other in the sense that, that beautiful imagery that you captured and told the story on has enabled you to think, well, what more out of that can I unearth?
What's
over
left
here? What's left? And I mean, the key word you used a moment ago was soul, right? I mean, that's contest, which I love, and finding new ways to showcase that, and keep the audience captivated. Brilliant. That you should constantly change that up. But then over here is, and I think it's very true of motorsport. There's other sports as well, but particularly motorsport because of the nature of it. Finding a way to take the helmet off, get to know them more away from the contest. There's soul in that, absolutely.
Well, the thing that really made me feel like that was something special to do was recently with the Justin Brayton episode. He talked about the fact that his parents split up when he was young, and then he moved into his auntie's garage and lived in his auntie's garage while he was still trying to be a motocross racer. And now more kids, if I'm a kid and I've got divorced parents and I got a single mum and I think, well, dad's out of the picture, I don't have a chance now of being a motocross superstar. Well, no.
Go and listen to
Justin
this bloke.
Brayton has just told you that it is possible. And he did it from Iowa, what snows half the year. So to me, yeah, those sort of stories and hearing that, because I think we over sexualize the contest part of it and how hard they train and the talent and it's like, because to then it's just like the like the impossible beauty standards, because you've got to be born James Stewart or you've got to be born Ricky Carmichael and you've got to do 3,000 laps and you've got to be homeschooled and you've got to, they're the stories, because they're incredible. They're amazing, but I feel like underneath that everybody does have the...
How inspiring was that, mate? I mean, to think that Brayton now, on the podium in Melbourne after a brilliant week there, a couple of days there, and with his family, proud family guy, so there's positives that have come out of that. And if he can, either here in Australia with the chapter here that he's enjoyed in Australia has been phenomenal, but obviously back in the States as well. I mean, if we can get maybe a handful of people that go, and then years later we find that story out that he met Justin once, or he knew his story or whatever. Fantastic. That's cool.
And I think that there is like a relatability to that, and I think it's part of even the reason why people enjoy Gypsy Tales. Like, I'm just a dude, like that knows those people. Like, I didn't have to. There was nothing special, and I think that it gives people maybe a little bit of hope that they can meet their heroes, or they can
you are giving them a pathway to do that, mate. You are they want to hear from these people, and if they can hear them in you used the campfire analogy earlier in the chat. If it can be like a dinner table kind of conversation, and they're a party to that, that's box ticked for me.
Yeah, and I think too, one of the other things I think about with the podcast side is that I feel like it's the only medium where the listener experiences it exactly the same as the creators.
Yep.
So your voice is in my head, my voice is in your head, we're wearing headphones.
Yep.
The fidelity is exactly like it goes into the computer, I'll put a tiny little filter on it to compress everything.
Give yourself a ballsier voice than
just
mine.
Make myself sound even sexier. and then that's it. What I hear in the moment right now is what the listener hears, and it's what you hear. And I think that, I don't know, I feel like that does something different, because
100%. And I reckon you're bringing them to that dinner table conversation, but it's not this disconnect of I love things like the Graham Norton show or some of the legends that have done programs like that over time. But it's not a studio environment. It's not a we have to sit up straight here. It's the camera and it's a.
We're going to add in 5.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And I love that. I still love doing that stuff. But in this forum here, where they feel inclusive because of all that stuff you've just rattled off. Yeah, that's why it works. I reckon that's why people like it, and that's and the fact that there's 500,000 podcasts, there's podcasts for everything in subject matter terms. The fact that you're the director, you can play it when you want, in the car and wherever. I mean, that's on the plane, perfect.
Did it surprise you how big it got and how like people's appetite for it as you were doing it?
Very.
Because you're learning, even though you had the Podcast One guys, like you're learning about. I mean, I'm sure when you recorded that first episode and played it and put it up and published it, you were like, "Oh, I don't know, we'll see how it goes." And then you
pretty much, and you never. I've always liked that anyway. You never stop learning. So in the TV example you gave before of using unbelievable lenses and choppers, you're always learning new ways to do stuff. And I think we've done a bit of that on the run here with the podcast. I like to try and not get too deep into the socials, but if there's a thread in there where people are talking about something or a piece of feedback or a suggestion, it's amazing how within kind of 6 months it was me ringing people that I knew in the industry and could I get you on and all that sort of stuff. Then it's come full circle. Now we get lots of lovely emails from people saying, "Hey, can you get to this person? Can you find that person? What about something in this genre or whatever?" That I think that's when you know that it's resonating or it's connecting with them. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you got any like bucket list guys that you've still sort of got to come on? I mean, obviously it's an ever evolving thing, but is there people that you really like? Oh, just that's one I want.
I'd really love to talk to Eric Banner. I'd love to, continue the story of the beast that he competed in at Targa Tasmania and that he restored, and have that conversation. He's a proper enthusiast and racer through and through, bikes and cars. When I say racer of cars, but he loves his bikes as well. And you'll often see him talking about MotoGP or whatever. So that's one. There's a couple that are probably a bit left of field here that I would like to do as well. I mean, Anthony Gobert went to the absolute highs of, and it's well documented in the papers that he's had a struggle in life terms away from things. I'd like to maybe just hear in his own words about where he's at and reminisce a bit about some of the amazing things that he did if he was up for that. As I said to you before, I also think there are some that are just going to be good storytellers. That when you read the headline that says, Gypsy Tales podcast 56 with whoever, it doesn't have to be the legendary name, but if it's the great storytelling,
some of my favourite episodes.
There you go.
A guy came on. His name's Taylor Cecil, and like I've known him for a couple of years. It's one of those things: 25 minutes here, 30 minutes there. The conversation sort of deal, and since the day I met him, I was like, I really want to get you on. Just took a while. He literally works up the road, but it was just one of those things. Takes a while to make it happen.
He didn't want to do it. He's a bit nervous.
No, just timing. Like it's just you get busy, your schedules don't line up. You can sort of try. We'll try again, and because that's one thing I never really rush to get people on.
Let them come at their own sort of.
Not like superstitious about it, but I'm definitely very. Like even with you, it's just we were just like, we could do it here. No, I'm going to be like, cool. I never try and force it or chase it and lock something in. Like, we got to get it done. Rah, rah. But so with Taylor, he come on, he's got, 2,000 Instagram follows, trains Mick Fanning and a bunch of these big guys. And he's just this really amazing spirit. There's just an aura about him, you know, and he's just such a great guy. And with practically zero social media following, you put out the episode and it just spread like wildfire.
There you go.
Like it was because it was just him, and I got to be very honest and vulnerable with some of the things that I'm going through at the moment and my thoughts on. I'm a deep thinker.
Yes, and I can tell.
But that's always been me. It's always layers deeper and deeper I love just a general understanding of either people or things and like really why. And he's just a dude that's really not just a thinker but more of a doer as well. How
good though that the audience clicked into that and found a connection with it. That's doesn't have to be the person that's got the, as I said before, the trophy cabinet full or the amazing record book. There's other great yarns, and some of them are people that work behind the scenes that absolutely make the whole deal go round.
And I think that it's been cool. A lesson to me as well is that to be a great host of a podcast, I think you've just got to be good at listening.
Most definitely. That never a truer word's been spoken. I've always tried to maintain when I've done TV stuff, I believe in several key things, right? I believe in balance massively when it comes to this. Sometimes you've got to ask a tough question, but it's the way you word that. The way you word that question. Rapport is key, and I won't do stuff that is your gut's a great litmus test, right? Like if it's doesn't feel right, then there's a reason. There's a reason for that, So. If the conversation just happens and in the Casey example, I mean, I didn't go there expecting that he was going to talk about chronic fatigue, and yet he opened up about that. That's
Well, because I think one of the things I've noticed with this is that I just wasn't that good of a listener before I started doing this, and even at the start of this, I wasn't that good of a listener. Like, it's actually a thing that you need to notice and work on in day-to-day life.
But that flows with the conversation, doesn't it? So we've we hardly know each other. We've sat down to start this, and I don't know how long we've been going for now, but that is key to. I could sit here now and use your laptop and type up, I don't know, 15, 16 questions that would be triggers for me, and I do that sometimes, depending upon who the guest is, if I don't know them super well. But if I don't listen, and if I don't pick up on certain things, and find a way to let them open up about it, it's not about dive in for the headline, look for it just, you can read, you can tell that they're comfortable to talk about that, or that's enough, move on now.
So did your time in radio help with all of this, do you think?
It did, but there is
because that was your first media gig,
pretty
right?
much.
Was radio, yeah.
I was originally working in banking and finance when I first got out of high school. My family have a history to a degree in business. My old man ran a hydraulic company with 60 staff, and my grandfather was in the rag trade. And there was kind of this unwritten want for me to go down the business path. But I love karting. Dad would always come with me, and I was very average at it, mate, just very ordinary. And the commentary spawned or spun off that.
Yeah, right.
And I did one job at Eastern Creek, or Sydney Motorsport Park as we now know it. There was an event over the Australia Day long weekend, which was all kinds of different circuit racing, and at night time they would move into drag racing, and it was just this they called it the Triple Challenge. And anyway, there was the karts were there in a kind of demonstrational race capacity. I wasn't racing. They said, could I go along and do some chats with them? I said yes, just for the big screen, and the PA. At the end of it, the guy producing it said, have you done this before? I said no. He said, do you want to do it again? I said yes. And like 2 weeks later, I was at Oran Park working as a pit reporter on, of all things, truck racing.
Yeah, right.
And it kind of went from there. And I went off and did some proper training. I then got a job at 2GB as a reporter. Just
Were you doing like sports reporting, or
to begin with? Yes, but I had in that transition period in finance, I had a really good boss. He loved MotoGP. He loved going to Phillip Island to watch the race.
And you got him some tickets.
No, he'd heard me though. He'd heard me doing a bit of stuff, doing a bit of moonlighting kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he said you should pursue that. And
that's cool.
It's very cool. So I did. Most of it was just over the PA. Lee Diffie and I would go around the east coast in particular of Australia and do all kinds of different car and bike events, and sometimes share them. If he got a better opportunity that came up, I would cover for him and vice versa.
Okay.
And mate, they were tough early days. He would come and stay at my folks' place, and I'd more or less do the same. And I like to think that stuff really served me really well. But anyway, my boss said, you should pursue that. Why don't you work for me a handful of days a week, almost like a freelancer? I'll let you earn some cash that way, and then go off Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, pursue the dream and see where it takes you. And 12 months later, I walked back into his office, and he said, just go.
That's awesome.
I know why you're here. And so, I thought my old man would freak, and my grandfather similarly. They could not have been more supportive, mate. Dad in particular said, you give this an honest 2 years, give it a real shot, do the hard yards like you did when you got this place, and you're on, not much in the pocket, and you're trying to make it happen. Same deal. I mean, I would drive from Sydney to...
How old were you at this point, by the way?
Early 20s. I would drive from Sydney to Ballina and do like dirt track racing to cover for Lee, or vice versa. Back to Sydney again to work, and you drive then because it was early days.
Yeah.
The radio thing opened up. It came about through a colleague who thought there was some potential and encouraged me to go off and study. Man, I was out of my league to begin with in radio, not because of the medium, but because of some of the general sports stuff I was doing. I made mistakes and I had to learn.
Motorsports.
Pretty much. But you learn. You're with some good people. Probably some of the best people I worked with in a journalistic sense that taught you how to, understand the story, to write the minimum amount of words, because you're always tight for words in radio, and that foundation, along with Billy Woods at Channel 10, I mean, those guys were unbelievably good to me. One guy I worked with in both Jason Morrison I worked with at 2GB, and he was our chief of staff in the newsroom at Channel 10, and he was great to me in both examples, to the point where when I'm fast forwarding a little bit here, but when September the 11th happened, I was working at 10 that night in the sport department. So this is like 10-ish at night. Most of the staff have started to disperse for the night. There's a handful of staff left. The producer for sport was already in the control room. Sandra Sully is reading the news. And I walked past the news exchange area where there's like a bank of monitors with all this different stuff coming in from around the world. And the guy was kind of a bit ashen-faced, and he said to me, "Man, I think I saw a plane go into the World Trade Center."
Wow.
I said, "Whoa." And the director and the producer of the news had already switched to it, and they were getting Sandra just to sort of live voice over what was going on.
Yeah.
And the phone rang, and the producer said to me, "Are you watching this?" And I said, "Yes." He goes, "Record everything and start making notes." So, okay. So I start making notes. I'm, at this point thinking World War III is going to break out.
Yeah.
And then the whole organisation came back to life again. I mean, it was an amazing period, mate, because there was a lot more people, and a lot of newsrooms like that now are very skeleton staff, but it's amazing. Everyone came together, right? So people started coming back in, and Jason, who I'd worked with at 2GB, said to me, "Have you been right across this?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay, are you okay to work through the night?" I said, 100%. So we worked right through the night. They did a 6 a.m. bulletin the next day, and it was an hour, and it encapsulated everything. I mean, they crossed to reporters over there and all sorts. But here was this little sport reporter who wrote and voiced, with their help, a 5-minute encapsulation, which I've kept to this day, of everything that unfolded with 9/11. So, I got to work with some good people. There were some significant moments along the way, radio in particular, from rugby league grand finals to whatever, just as a reporter.
Yeah.
And then working through the newsroom as well. I did sort of daytime news at the end before I left, and then moved into Channel 10 in a more full-time role. But there's some significant things that have happened along the way there, mate, just by sheer chance. But you remember those moments. Those people show you what to do and how to do it, and they also instill in you a bit of integrity and ethics and the way you go about that. And I think when you peel everything back, and we're in a new medium here now, those things still apply. The ethics and stuff still apply for me.
Yeah, because that's one of the things I've always watched with you is just like, it's just, you seem like the consummate professional, but it doesn't seem forced or contrived. It's like you just genuinely have that much respect for your position, respect for the platform and the message that you've been entrusted with to deliver. It's just, I don't know, it always has come across with you, and your voice will, it's not like you're the guy that's calling the main race every single weekend, but I always remembered the way that you would report on things, and I just always got that
Thank you.
That vibe from you, and then when I went and had a look back at what you'd done, it really makes sense that you've went through the sort of, you really went through the full gamut of media, and because I can relate to that in the film sense of, even you saw how pedantic I was about just headphones. There's certain things after so many years of being in this is the right way to do it.
Yep.
This is the way it should be done. I don't care if it's a little bit out of frame here, you fix that frame. If the audio's, you fix that. And I just think you have that same approach with your profession. And it seems like you just really respect what you have as a person that gets to deliver certain messages or interview certain people. And I've always noticed that.
Thank you. I have always believed that I'm very lucky to do what I do. And I default to a position of respect every time, particularly with the athlete. I feel very fortunate to talk to them, that they are comfortable to talk to me, and I'm very mindful of what they've achieved. So I work within that sphere, but it didn't come easy, mate. If I'm brutally honest, the toughest lesson, or one of the toughest lessons I learned, is that it's, particularly on camera, in a television sense, it's not acting. It's not. I felt this almost in the early years. It was like a need to sort of prove yourself. But over time, I realised that the moment you drop that veneer, I mean, I'm no, in TV terms, I'm no glamour or what have you. But it didn't matter.
No.
The moment you realise that you just be you, just be genuine. Come at it from the gut or the heart. If you're reading those signs all the time, that stuff serves you well. And I always try and think too about what is the question or what is the subject that the audience is thinking about. So I don't have to be the guru that knows every stat or every technical thing, but if I can unearth that from you, because ultimately you're the one they want to hear from, right? Then that's what I want to do. That so it didn't come easy, but I'm very comfortable with that now. Probably the thing that I do, even all these years later, mate, probably the thing that I do wrong sometimes is that I am way too hard on myself if it is not perfect. Yeah. So I walk away some days and I kind of wince or relive it. I wish I didn't do that. Yeah. It's a bit of a default in my makeup. But I do think what that helps you with is to make it better next time. Yeah. And there's the moment I think you get complacent and you think that you're on top of it, you're goner in this game. And that's I know my place in the rung or on the ladder. Respect is a natural thing with the guest or whatever, and it's the real me, mate. Yeah.
Do you see though people now wanting to hear from you more and your perspective more when you're doing these podcasts?
Yes, and sometimes
it's a weird feeling, isn't it?
It's sometimes like I did quite an impassioned plea before the podcasting in 2016 or 2017. There's quite a heated moment involving Garth Tander and Fabian Coulthard here on the Gold Coast, actually. And it blew up on social media and fans were kind of firing in at each other. And I am very anti-bullying, mate. I don't like it. I don't like to see school kids subjected to that. I don't like seeing motor racing people subjected to that in a social media space, because I think about their families seeing that stuff might be 10 years' time. Somehow
Fabian was really affected by Bathurst, really affected.
Yeah, it's okay to have a viewpoint. Yeah. It is okay to wear your colours with pride. You might be a Chad Reed supporter and I'm, Ricky Carmichael, whatever. Staunchly wear those colours and back your guy or back your girl or whatever it might be that you're following, or the team. But just respect the other person's viewpoint. Like why does the argument have to drill down to this horrible stuff that people say sometimes, that when you meet them, when you occasionally join the dots and you figure it out, you're at Marvel Stadium and you figure out that the fan waiting to see Chad Reed is the guy that blew up, whatever, and they're not like that when you see them face to face. So I don't want it to be vanilla, mate. I don't like the thought of that. I mean, the in anything in life, whether you're following UFC or whatever, you got to have a passion for it. You got to be fired up about it. But I just think that it's horrible to. They're a human being at the end of that. They mightn't read
they got kids that see it.
Absolutely,
it's
just shit.
Even like my mum read iTunes reviews of people just fucking roasting me, and like it really upset her. Yeah, and it's just like, I mean, to me, I don't care that these days. Like it's sort of, I dealt with maybe a month of feeling shitty about it, then I was like, oh, whatever. But that's not to say that it doesn't affect my mum. Like she doesn't have to deal with the thing. Well, I have to deal with this daily, but she might look at it at some point. It really affects her, and it's like, dude, like you're being a dick to my mum. Essentially, it's a weird. But I think that's an overarching theme in society at the moment, and definitely. I think that it's just a.
Do you reckon it'll change? Do you reckon we'll grow out of it? I mean, begs the whole argument about, do social media outlets, do sporting bodies, it's a massive deal in a very expensive way to monitor and weed all that stuff out. And part of me thinks we have a responsibility to do that, particularly a sporting body. They don't want their fans to see that stuff or to see it that bad. But that takes monitoring. That costs money to do that. And it's, we could ban you tomorrow. You could get kicked off that forum tomorrow, and you can come back. You change one letter in the little pseudonym name that you give yourself, and you're back on doing it again. But the answer I think is somewhere in the middle. It requires maintenance. It also requires a society mind shift, mate. You just can't do that. Or I don't think people should do that.
I think that it's just education. Like I think the answer to all problems in society for me is just straight up education. Like, people need to know why they shouldn't do it. They need to be open-minded enough to want to accept new information, because I think that while it, like, so for example, friends of mine, they won the block this year, and their social media, like, we were talking to them, they were saying that the producers block just hundreds of words. So anyone that types a comment, and I'm sure supercars would do similar
already hidden,
stuff.
it doesn't make it to the timeline.
It just gets filtered out, and it's like, I can see the merit in that, but then I also think that there is, I'm probably like a anti-government person in a way, anti-authority in a way, because I think it's like, it's nice you start there, but then it's like, okay, so then what's the extrapolation of that? And now it's no one gets to comment at all, and I don't think that's a good thing. So you're right, the answer's in the middle, but I think it's like, if you get rid of the people that want to engage in the extremes, then the middle's what's left. So I don't think you need to force the middle on people as much as you need to educate the people that are on the extremes. Like, educate a person that tells someone to fucking go die because they drive a Holden. Educate that person the same as the person that is saying no comments, no interact, because to me it's the same thing.
Key word for me is educate, right? And I think that in a racing sense, because, you know, invariably the rule books are massively thick, full of, you know, difficult. The moment you can educate a fan about, no, hang on, this is why that happened, or this is why, often that heat of the moment response will change. So I definitely think that, you know, maybe that's the onus in the sports dealing with a lot of that stuff is maybe put their arm around some of these guys. And, okay, we don't like the way you've spoken, what you've done. That's not right for us. But, you know, understand this is why, you know, that particular decision was made, or why that person said what they did.
And I think that just people don't know what they don't know. And there might be people that think that comments are completely innocuous. And there's also, I've had people that have, like, trolling is super real. Like, I've had people write me off in comments, and then I write back to them, and then I get a DM from them going, "Hey mate, no, super, like, I'm actually a big fan." So I mean, there's so many levels of it, but I think that, I mean, there's just another thing too. Like, if
interacting like that, I reckon is important where you can. I mean,
do you interact with other people?
Absolutely. And if there's a mistake in it, sometimes I've not all television stations like you doing that, you know, admitting that something wasn't right or whatever. But I just think you need a bit of empathy, right? So if there's a thread happening in a conversation and you realise, oh, hang on a minute, that's actually not right, or the audience didn't like that. You need to sort of understand that and go, okay, well, how can we fix that next time? Or okay, thanks. I've passed that on, and we're going to look at a way to hopefully fix that. I can't guarantee it, but we'll try. And just that little bit of empathy goes a long way. I don't believe in it being a BS response. It can't just be saying stuff to appease people. You've got to really try and do that. But I try and listen to a common thread if there is one. But I'm also big on, if they're massively out of touch with what's going on, I just very kindly say, you know, hey, just so you know, and try and then you do get those very often, those direct messages. Oh, hey man, I didn't know that, and it changes their viewpoint. And I think then they go away and maybe talk to 5 of their friends and go, okay, well, A, they're really listening, or B, I got this response. I don't get off on them thinking they got a response from me, but I am pleased that they feel like we're dealing with it in some way, or that it. So yeah, I haven't sat down and gone, okay, in this podcast thing, I need to interact with my listeners or whatever. I just think that every once in a while I'll sit down, I'll look at stuff. If there's a conversation happening, or they feel, I try and respond to not all of them, but a good few of them, and that's been one of the cool things for this, is building a community of people that because we're all into the same stuff. Like if you're a regular listener of any podcast, it means you're into whatever it is that they're talking about. So there's definitely something. You've included them in the conversation again, mate, haven't you?
Yeah. And people, I think that there's like a sense of belonging that people don't seem to have a lot as well these days too. I feel like, you know, the sort of saying like we're more connected than we ever have been, but we're really not. You know, we're sort of connected to death almost.
There's this great photo today I saw on social media from the actress Bette Midler. She's in a museum or what was she looking at? Sorry, there were these 3 kids and they were seated in front of her. So she's taken the photo like that. The 3 kids are buried in their phones and behind her is the most amazing artwork and an older guy is admiring the artwork and she's like, what is wrong with this photo? You know, they're so deep. They were deep, but they weren't taking in the beauty of the art around them. And, you know, I took my kids to their first ever concert.
Oh, really?
In New Zealand
11 and 13.
11 and 13.
Yeah.
So, mate, I'm not even going to probably pronounce his name right. We went to Khalid.
Oh, okay,
right?
yeah.
And they're massive fans of his.
I've got tickets for his later this year.
They loved it. They absolutely loved it. So, anyway, it was just amazing to sort of look around and I'm sort of taking in the concert and the venue and the atmosphere and so many of them were watching it through their phones. Like, you got to record it. You got to watch it. So, yeah, it's different how we digest that stuff, but I'm big on, you know, sit back, listen, look, take it all in. And
the phones thing is crazy, and I imagine being a parent because you grew up without a phone. It wasn't until you would have been in your mid-20s, early 30s that the phone thing even happened. So I wonder what it's like. Well, your kids are old enough that they wouldn't have been the iPad babies, but like the iPad baby's a real thing, and that just is that a trip for you to like see, and is that something that you have to do as a parent to keep the kids off that stuff?
Yeah, but and also to understand that that's how they live, so it's striking a balance. And all that. Because
you can't really fight it, can you? Because then you just put your kid behind the 8 ball.
But they do so much at school that involves that stuff now. I mean,
really?
you know, they reckon that, I mean, like my daughter the other day, my oldest one, she is doing an assignment, and I could hear her doing a voiceover. I'm thinking, whoa, and she's even using a few inflections, and the youngest one has now started to pick it up and do it too. So they'd, you know, very simply, because you can, you know, they'd made a fun little video, they put a voiceover on it, some text and some graphics, and they did it all themselves. You know, I mean, this is shit that I was used to when I first started in television, that took a proper cameraman, you know, beautiful, you know,
recording booth,
you got it,
and
now you just do it with your phone, and so you can't not encourage that. I want to encourage that. That's their world, and that's what they do. But a bit of balance. My wife and I don't always get it perfect, but Sarah and I try and, you know, make sure.
Extremely difficult.
It's hard, man. It's hard because you don't want them to get hung up on likes and follows, but it is, you know, it is a part of the world. It's just balance, you know, making them park it and come out and do other things.
It blew me away the other day. I had this chick, Casey O'Neill, on the podcast. She's 22 and she's a professional mixed martial arts fighter. Beast, like proper beast. But she was saying, and I just didn't even put 2 and 2 together, that she grew up with Facebook and Instagram at school. Like, that was just her life. And normal. She said she had a lot of self-esteem issues, and she would just add everybody on Facebook just so that she maxed out her friends counter. And like, I just didn't even consider that shit. I was like, wow, this is, and she's not, I didn't even really perceive the age difference to be as much as it was. Like, she's an adult to me. But then when you go into it, it's like, wow.
That 10 years,
the world changed so dramatically in those 10 years. But there's a weird thing with entitlement too. I think that, I don't know, do you put your episodes on YouTube?
No, they're not visual at the moment. Just audio, and no, we don't do YouTube just yet.
Because that's the weird place, man. YouTube's the weird zone. Like, I've got a video of it's like a segment of me and Chad's conversation about James, and I've got 1,000 comments on there of people just like ripping me, like just so hectic. But it's like, that's the only forum. So it's like these weird little pockets of different platforms have different vibes about them. Like, it's so weird.
Yeah. Some of them are you learn to not play to that, but you learn. You know, Instagram's cool. You know, people are generally pretty good there. Twitter's a hot pot for. I
don't do Twitter really.
Don't you? Yeah. I mean, I think it's doing a bit of that anyway. And then Facebook's kind of a combination of the two. I love it, mate. I'm an older guy compared to you, but I love learning about that stuff, understanding that stuff. You know, with the kids, you brought that up before. I try and, you know, we want them to have a bit of rope. But we want to understand, okay, just you got to think about what you're doing here, and if you're going to post some stuff on Instagram, what are we posting? Why are we posting it? And you know, so you don't get that stuff perfect, but you try.
Yeah, it's definitely waters to navigate, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, and when you think about it, and it's the same.
Can't go to your parents for advice either because it's different. It's
we're all just like kind of navigating it. The like
school of hard knocks.
Yeah, everyone's just like kind of by the seat of their pants, like.
Yeah.
Oh. But even me lately, like I've found out just lately, like I'm too engaged. I need to take a step back.
That's good
like
that you realise that, mate. That's good.
Yeah, but you sort of you have to, because I think you can get pretty lost in the whole thing. Because essentially, like, do you feel like with the do you deal with a lot of the numbers side of things, or is that all sort of through Podcast One?
They know way more than I do.
Yeah.
I'm certainly aware of it, and obviously I have from years in the business, you end up having commercial relationships with different people. So some then come to you and say, "Oh, we're doing this project with you, but we'd love to play in the podcast as well." So you end up having those discussions. But I'm not so much the podcast numbers, but from a social point of view, I find myself trying to not get too hung up on different things, Is that little mate all right? What's going on?
He does it all the time. He hears my brother come in and then he's like wants to go and hang out. Yeah, he's a pest.
He's good. I love it. I love the fact we have 2 dogs at home. I love him, mate. So
he goes everywhere. Like when I was in America, I had like a bag for him. I used to take him on the plane, and then as soon as the plane took off, he'd just lay on my lap the whole time. So
that's awesome how you can do that over there.
Single dad, so I have to take him everywhere. He's met more riders than most people.
I love how he kind of just subtly growled in a little way. It was just like, I don't want to interrupt Dad on the chatting away here, but I do need to let him know I want to go and see what's going on.
He's the biggest pest, but no, he's so good. Like it killed me. It took like 12 months for him to get here in the end, like with all the appointments.
That would break my heart, man.
It was terrible. But now, like, he lives a pretty good life, so I'm just like, you can deal with it, bro.
As long as it didn't affect him that much, being away from you that long and all that process.
No, he was fine, like, because I was real worried about that, because he's a pretty sensitive dog. Yep. Like, he won't, like, if you call him, he won't even come to you.
Okay.
But with me, he does.
Knows.
Yeah, so, but it's like, it's funny, people get real pissed off at him because they think he's real arrogant.
No, he's good. He's good. I noticed when I walked in, like, he came to the stairs and he checked me out, and I like that. That's good.
But he's not one of those dogs that's like all over everyone.
No, but who are you? No, this is cool. Okay, you're all right.
I wanted to ask before, when you were doing those drives to these different events, like you've got like that, because I can relate to that, because I'll do that with the filming.
Yep.
So were you having these like grandiose visions of yourself calling Formula One races and doing these, what you've achieved now, but did you have those visualizations on the whole drive? Like, were you did you get in those trance like things and it's just you and the road and then you've got those visions?
Bits, maybe I wouldn't say I obsessed over it. I probably did a bit of, am I going the right way here? Is this going to pan out? Will it, or am I going to have to go back to finance? That kind of thing. I sat back and did a bit of my buddy Lee Diffie, who's in the States and works for NBC. And
side note, I think I'm actually related to him.
No way.
Yeah, my dad dropped in like some like broadcast that he was on one day, like, oh yeah, he's like your 4th cousin, or like some kind of. I'd love to actually figure out if that's legit or not.
You got to, I mean, because he's killing it in the States. He's doing an amazing job. Sorry, side note. No, side note. Where were we going with that? I'm trying to remember.
So you would have these, like, you're on these road trips and you're thinking, is this the right thing?
Is this the right thing? And you. It was great because he and I were such good mates that you'd spur each other on. And we made it fun. You'd go for a beer at night time after the race was over, and
because he's going through what you're going through. There's not many people that can relate.
He was kind of coming at it from a 2-wheel perspective. He would do a lot of dirt track, and some events we did together. We went to an event at Fairbairn Park in Canberra. I can remember we must have called 80 to 100 races or something. I can't remember now. And you'd go. Okay, up next, it's the 80cc's, and you'd put the microphone down. There was like a boombox, an old boombox, and you'd play some music, press play for 30 seconds, and then pick it up and do the next race again. So it didn't have all the fancy stuff. You'd have to live read some ads and thank a few people that had sponsored different things, but they're great. Those formative days are really good, and they were good. We're great mates now. We talk every week, and it'll be
That's awesome.
and often it'll be a stirring conversation. He rings me with some sort of funny anecdote about something that winds me up. And we've gone different paths. He's gone very successfully. He went to World Superbike for a while in Europe and the UK for a couple of years. Came back to Australia, did some more supercars, and he's been in the States now for another 12 odd years and done all kinds of stuff.
He did the motocross for a couple of years.
Yeah, he's bloody good, mate. He's a real go-getter. He's got a great thing about, this is where I was coming to. The point is, one of his lines is just enjoy the journey, enjoy life. You know? And, to think that I can look back now. I went to the Akubra Nationals at Tamworth in maybe 94 or something, 95. Casey Stoner raced in 4 classes back then. He's a little tacker and just stuff like that. Yeah. So you think back on it now, and at the time you don't necessarily realise it, but
because you're so in it.
You're so in it, and just want to do a good job and things. But you look back now and you go, wow. So I drove, whatever it was, 6 to 8 hours to go and do something, and how the paths have crossed years later, and even some that you saw back then that were dynamite too, unbelievably good riders but maybe only made it to this level, didn't make it internationally, and you realise they had a huge amount of talent. So good journey.
It's funny with a guy like Lee, the relationship that gets formed when you're doing something that is so specific.
Yep.
And there's just not many people that you can actually relate to.
Yep.
And I've got that with Wes Williams. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but he was the owner of Verb Moto, and that's who I ended up doing a lot of my big film project with. Like, me and him forever and a day, we will never not be friends because he understands this thing that we were so passionately following, and it was so hard, and the grind. Like, I remember a day at Alden Baker's facility in Florida. I had something happen with the batteries for my camera. They didn't show up in luggage, or something like that happened, and we were there. I had a super slow motion Phantom camera, and I couldn't turn it on. So Alden gave me a Honda 2000 generator, and I would carry the camera in one hand
and the generator
in the other hand, and I had the power lead wrapped around me, and I would run. I ran. We had 20 minutes with Ken, Jason Anderson, and Adam Cincerello, and I had 20 minutes for their last moto, because by the time we fucked around with the generator, I had all these shots I had to get, and it's 105 degrees in Florida, and I'm running around a supercross track with $100,000+ worth
of
the
beautiful shots.
Oh, I fucking nailed it. Like, awesome. I just absolutely pinned it.
And you remember that film in your mind. I love stories like that, mate.
But you'd have the exact same things, and you'd remember them with Lee, because there's not many people that can relate to what that experience was like.
And invariably, you're different human beings with some things. So some stuff I'm not great at, and he's really good at, and maybe a bit of vice versa. Yep. And you help each other in that regard. I mean, he's an unbelievably good people person and a real go-getter. And so you look at some of that stuff, and that helps, like
his networking.
But not in a not in a fake way. No, not at all. He's just good with people, and very, very good at his craft, mate. He's exceptionally disciplined at studying it, getting to know the things behind the scenes that will be important to the audience in the contest, and then how to get it out of the people he works with. He's great at that bond with the team of people behind the scenes. He knows, almost everybody by first name, and stories about their family, and he connects with them in that regard. And, he has that sort of relationship with some of the most significant races globally now as well too. So you learn stuff off each other, but we've got really fond memories of those early days where we were, hanging at my mum and dad's, and, not much in the way of money, and he's on a fold out bed kind of deal. And those, I still believe in. Any of the stories you've done or I've done along the way in podcast land, you find those stories of sacrifice, and they really do shape you. They really do, and the good guys and girls never forget them. Ever.
Do you have the stories of this is it? This is the last job. I'm doing this one, and then I'm done. I'm going to go back. It's not working out. Do you have those stories, or were you always
me or of racer? You mean
no, for yourself with your career?
There are days where it drives you mad, mate. Absolutely. It's probably if you're not thick-skinned enough to deal with it, you talked either social media comments before, maybe it's the politics of the business or whatever. If you're not thick-skinned enough, you're in the wrong game in many respects. I have a level of thick skin. It's probably not thick enough at times. I'm probably a bit on the softer as marshmallow side in life. So that probably means that I get a bit affected by that more. But you do get shaped over time, and I sleep very soundly knowing that I put my best foot forward. I did the best job possible, and most importantly, I was true to who I was when I did that. There are days where you go, I'm over that, but one thing I keep coming back to, if I ever have those days, is the people. So and the machine. Right, so the moment I walk back into Marvel and I talk to Chad Reed or when we were commentating with Ricky Carmichael, man, that was the first time I'd ever called with him. And so there's Jason Wygant, there's myself, and there's Ricky, and we had 3
star-studded lineup.
It was, mate, I was honoured to be there, honestly, like really, and I wanted to sort of steer conversation, sort of do play-by-play type deal, and get us out of the key broadcast things that needed to happen. We were doing 2 shows on the run at the same time. There's a bit of a juggle in that. I knew Jace was all over the storylines of different things, and I knew that what Ricky would bring would be phenomenal. And there were times where you're kind of doing that. You're sort of watching out into the arena. You're watching the screens in front of you. But I want eye contact with Ricky because that's important. And there was one moment where he shut his eyes and he was like visualizing, and I tapped into that for the audience. I was like, hey, it's like you were riding with him. And he sort of laughed. He said, actually, I wanted to make sure in my description that I got my lefts and rights right and all that sort of stuff. So when you then have that, it refills the tank, mate. And if you do feel flat, if you do feel over the politics and that shit drives me mental, mate. I just want to be television and broadcasting goes through a lot of similarities to what race teams go through. Yeah, I bet they go through politics. There's issues with people
contracts,
and all that stuff.
Yeah.
For a Bathurst, for example, you're talking about anywhere between 260 and 300 people to make that broadcast go round. It's a massive deal.
A lot of people, a lot of egos,
a lot of different personalities. Exactly. So when there is a bit of that, I get disheartened. Yeah, no doubt about that. But the moment I reconnect with racer like I did with in the example I gave with Ricky, or I'm around the cars or the bikes or the sound of 4-stroke, 2-stroke, whatever, it goes away, and it's you'll go through ebbs and flows where you've had a couple of low points in your career for whatever reason. For me, the big thing in that scenario is it is not the low moment and what's gone wrong, either something you've done wrong or something that you've been wronged by someone. Yeah. It's you're actually measured by how you deal with it. Yeah. And I've been big on, everyone talks about that, you be eyes forward and you don't look backwards and all that sort of stuff. There is truth in that, but it's how you deal with it. And if you could deal with it with dignity, pick yourself up, power on, and don't dwell too much on that thing. The people actually look and go, oh man, okay, he's reinvented himself a little bit, or he's that's one of the big takeouts for me, a life lesson, if you will. Yeah. That if you can do that, if you can pick yourself up and power on like that, often that's how you're measured or viewed.
Dad always says, don't trip over something behind you.
100%. Dick Johnson laughs about the only thing you get if you're looking backwards is a stiff neck or a sore neck. You know what I mean? So, yeah, good. It's pretty good advice. Yeah,
that whole politics and everything, and you said that you're on the softer side. I think that there's yin and yang to that though, because you might look at the way that you're soft about some things as a negative, but it's that side of you is probably what's allowed you to have that rapport, gain that trust.
Thank you.
So there's a yin and yang to that, because I look at I'm brash and I just don't give a fuck. I don't, and it's like, that gets me in trouble. But then it's also a thing that I think is some people really heavily gravitate towards. So I think that it's just like owning that, being, I'm just like, well, that's...
And there's admiration for that in the conversation. When you do that, people go, oh, I'm glad you said that, because that's kind of how I felt, but I didn't want to say it or couldn't articulate it or whatever.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's not that bad of a thing to have like that sort of softer side, because, I mean, for me, I lack any form of that softer side, like I'm kind of like ruthless when it comes to that. And I look at that, I'm like, fuck, I probably shouldn't be like that, but then it's like you just. But
you can't be too soft either. There's middle ground in it for sure, mate. And yeah, I think you're right actually that it has probably served me well in a lot of respects.
I would think it more than hurt, because I just think that it just, like I said, it comes across that you're just this genuine professional guy and I don't think it's just that you've got respect for the guests or the people that you're interviewing. I think you've got respect for the sport itself and your position within the ecosystem, and like that's something that I think is very endearing. And I think that that's something that when I started this podcast, and I've talked about it before, I'll put myself on blast for it, I almost wanted to be above the sport and talk in terms of motocross, because that's sort of my background, where I come from. I almost wanted to be too cool for it and be like, oh, I don't really. So
when did it click then? When did you go? Because I reckon that's the thing. The moment you can, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a conscious thing. Maybe it just happens over time. You relax in your own skin. You feel more comfortable doing what you're doing. The moment you do that, change.
When I think it was actually was when did you see Red Bull Moto Spy? Any of those videos? So we got included in the Red Bull Moto Spy, and I think that you could see in that I talked from a very different position in that than maybe some of the other guys, and it was like. You could just tell I was frothing on it. And because I really was, like, these dudes are my friends. Like Ken Roxon used to come to our house every afternoon when he finished riding, and we'd drink a couple Coronas in the hot tub.
Fantastic.
And, like that, I have like that reverence for these guys. As like, I'm proud of them as my friends, and I'm in awe of what they can do because I've seen it firsthand. And I think as soon as I saw myself talking about it like that, I was like, dude, you've been a fucking dick you've been above it in a way, because I think that when you're in like a niche sort of thing, I think sometimes there's I want to get out of that niche, I want to be mainstream, I want to be there's different things at play there. And I think once I saw on screen that attitude, and it was like super endearing in my own eyes of like, oh, it's cool to be a fan, Great.
It's great that you realise that, mate. And that fan thing, earlier on in our chat here, we talked about the inclusion of the audience member, either through the style of sound, the style of conversation, whatever it might be. That's another way you're doing it again, because they're fans too. And the moment they realise you're a fan like that, you're a proper authentic fan, not a put on. That helps, it helps the whole thing resonate with them, I reckon, connect with them.
And it's coming full circle, I think, too, because Jason Anderson and his whole Team Fried thing, like, he's fully on that. Wait, shut up. There's food out.
Love him. Let him out.
Yeah, actually, I think they've turned the aircon off. I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Cool.
I'm going to go and turn. Can you feel it?
All good, mate. I'm all good.
That whole, the Team Fried thing is pretty crazy with that whole, like, Jason Anderson's like, I'm doing this because my job's so fucking cool. Why would I not want to show people this? And I think that, I don't know, there was definitely there was like an clique when I was in America, and the guys that would talk shit on racing and that like, oh, I'm just here to get a paycheck. Like that infiltrated the psyche of the sport,
flavor of what you were doing
when I was there, and I think that I just adopted that, and I sort of started to analyze, just the position that you take without thinking, like subconsciously, that you take this position, and as soon as I become aware of it, I was like, that's gross, dude. Like that's not the move.
In this, there's constant. I've been, I don't know, since the early to mid 90s doing it. you never ever stop learning.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, there's always a way you personally can deliver it better. There's great days where you get off air and it's almost that sense of adrenaline or satisfaction that I'm sure perhaps the racers get at a massively different level. But when you know that it's all gone well, when you know that as a team you've been able to all hit the
come
marks,
together,
that's a great feeling. But I realised two things. One, that you have a big responsibility. You're kind of up the front of the bus, and the people that you're taking in that bus that are working behind the scenes in graphics or wherever you've got a responsibility to do a good job for them. They've worked for weeks, some of them months, trying to put stuff together. So that's point number one. But then also too, you're a cog in the wheel, so you need to work in with that and deliver with the machine to get to the end result. And it's got to be. It's an overused word at the moment, but it's got to be authentic. It's got to be really you. If it doesn't, sometimes people want the slant on the story or cut to the whatever it is, the hard hitting aspect of it. If that's there and they want to talk about that, that's fine. But I'm not going to go sticking my foot in the door trying to, grab a yarn from some racer who's been, through a difficult set of circumstances just because someone wants a headline. They can go and get nicked. I won't do that. I'll happily sit down with them if they're comfortable doing that. And not be concerned if we've got to have a couple of tough questions there. But so long as it's balanced, mate.
You've obviously just got a crazy passion for motorsports still. And do you... Where does that come from? Because you raced karts when you were younger.
I went when I was knee high before I even started. My mum and dad will tell you that mum and dad used to go to the Speedway in Sydney. They used to go to the Sydney Showground, in later years to Liverpool and to Parramatta. We would watch bikes race, but we also enjoyed sprint car racing, speed car racing. So Speedway was probably the background for me to begin with, but only as a fan. With my old man loved it and still does to this day. He's 80 next year, and he nothing more excites him more than
he must be so proud when he sees you come on the telly with all that.
I did a podcast with a guy by the name of Gary Rush this year, who's just a legend in sprint car terms. And in crazy 6 degrees of separation. My dad used to do business with him. Dad was very much in awe, but they did a bit of business together, and so he knew Gary, so I did the chat with him and wove in a few stories that Dad had told me and things like that, which personalised it a bit. And so that for him, he's to think that I could get his son could get to the stage of talking to someone like that. And Gary's a ripper guy, mate. He almost gets a bit funny about you recounting the greatness of what he's done. He's done some amazing things.
That's a bit of a barrier in podcasting in general.
It can be, but with trust and with the right sort of conversation, you can get. Some of them don't work out, mate. I mean, he did. His was great, but some of them, when you compare them to others, they're a bit too humble. But that's okay.
I've literally had to say to people, I'm like, hey man, you realise you're the best dude in the world at this.
But that's who they are. That's who they are. That's what they're.
It's super cool.
So anyway, so mum and dad loved it. I was, as a fan, going to watch it ever since I was little. When I got to the point where we could do a bit of karting and a few other things, I did some rally sprints and lap dashes, just sort of low level circuit based stuff with mates from high school. We all went halves or thirds actually in a race car. They were great ways to experience it, but I knew straight. I have a very clear moment. I did a 12-hour go-kart race at Eastern Creek. It was overnight. It started.
That's so rad.
It was awesome. And then Greg Murphy was in it, Craig Baird was in it, Marcus Ambrose was in it. There's all this great lineup of people that were hooking up with mates just to go go-karting. It was low-key fun over summer, no serious race stuff for them to worry about. And in the middle of the night, stupid me, I think I'm going half okay, and I get this like rattle, knock on the back of the go-kart, and it's Ambrose, and he comes roaring past, and he sort of waved at me, and like he just disappeared into the distance.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, so you know you're never going to be able to operate at the level those guys operate at. So how can I be involved as someone who's passionately loved it as a little tacker?
Yeah.
Well, Mum reckons I drove her mad talking, mate, before I could pretty much even walk. So I've blended all that together. I've blended something I love, something that I've been a gibber forever and a day, and now to be able to talk about it for a living is, I'm very fortunate to do that.
What, being around so many great athletes, what do you think that it is that lets Marcus Ambrose blow past you? Well, because essentially I think we're feeling the same things, like the same, fuck, I need to hit the brakes.
Yeah.
He's feeling that the same way you are. He's just feeling it 45 meters down the road.
They have this innate thing that, okay, you can train, right? You can train a rider, you can train a driver, you can do those things, but there is still this innate thing, I think, up here which enables them to hold it wide open longer, to lean on the tire harder, to whatever it is. It's a very rare thing that not everyone possesses. I'm in awe of those that have that skill and that can enhance it and go to a whole nother level, either technically understanding the car or through. You look at Lowndes even now. I mean, he's an endurance driver these days, but he gets in that car and he just rags it, mate.
Yeah.
And in all kinds of different conditions, he's unbelievably good. That's art, mate. That's a skill that you have to sit back and admire. And trophies and championships and Bathursts, and okay, that's really cool. But when you understand that this is it's not superhuman, but almost,
it is.
It almost.
It is really,
that kind of skill that what do we got in supercars terms? We've got 25 cars on the grid. Nation of 25 million people. You got a 1 in a million chance of maybe making it there.
That's crazy when you put it like that.
I mean, Paul Morris had that analogy the other day, and that's. Mate, if you can do that, it just shows how truly special you are. And then to deal with the politics, to deal with the commercial realities, to bounce back from near career-wrecking moments, whatever it might be. I mean, to put all of that together and go out there and do it, I think so. That's a real. Some of them, I think, they're just born with it. That what I love, which is maybe where we're going in this discussion, is how they discover that. Okay, maybe dad's had a connection in motor racing or whatever, but I mean, there are stories about someone who jumps on a bike and the moment they're roaring around on a little Pee-wee 50, they're dynamite. You just know they're. I mean, Stoner. There's stories of Stoner as a little tacker, and Mick Doohan is at the same dirt track this particular day. Maybe Aaron Slights. I'm trying to think who else may have been there. I mean, this is a little kid on a 50 and he's bombing it up the inside under brakes, and everyone's going like, "Who is this?
What?
Who is this kid?" I love that stuff. How they find their connection, how they pick up the tennis racket, how they pick up the golf clubs, and then the application. Okay, they work enormously hard. They're passionately immersed in it.
Yeah,
they love it. But how they first find that connection, I think that's. One of my closest buddies is Darryl Beattie, who raced he and I have known one another for ages and commentated together for many, many years. I mean, he won a bike on Agro's Cartoon Connection. He had to write a letter into them, tell them why he should be the winner.
Wait, I think I've heard this story before, actually.
And that kickstarted his whole journey, mate.
Isn't that unbelievable?
Yeah. And I think I've been meaning to talk to him about. I think he's tracked down the bike and is going to restore it and found it. So like that's a podcast. Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome.
Right there for you.
So and a guy who loves Outback Australia and goes riding with people out there now and shows them that stuff. So yeah, I mean, I love how they find that connection, how they develop the skill set. But I have great admiration for that. I think it's an innate skill that very few people have got.
Because I think that there's people that are in our game, essentially. Obviously, we do different things, but we're in the same field. It was the same for me. I love racing, and I just knew I wasn't good enough to do it, but loved it enough. I think the people that end up doing what we do are the people that are genuinely like, the fuck's going on here?
Yep.
Like, how are they actually doing this?
There's that. So you're in awe in the one sense, and then the skill set that you get from media, I think, helps you. You talked about listening before, right? So you're listening to the athlete and what they're talking about, but you also get to the point, I reckon, where you're thinking about, okay, what would they want to know? What would the audience want to know? What's the natural line of questioning here that leads you to ask about, why Chad Reed at 18 left Australia and took that punt, and not everyone has that gumption to just pack up and have a crack like that, So how did he do it? And what is the audience thinking, and how can I bring the two together? How can I get that? One
of my things I think I do is I like to try to find the things that they don't even know that they know.
Pretty cool when they open up about something like that, hey?
And I've had those moments where people go like, I've never really thought about it. And then I'm like, I'll think about it now.
Because they live in a world where they're going, back to back to back with press interviews or commercial commitments, and they've got to go out and practice, qualify, whatever it might be. You talked about bite-sized moments in life before, and so they're living a bit of that. So sometimes they don't always get the freedom to be able to sit back and go, I never really contemplated that. Yeah.
Well, I think there's a part of it too that the guys like Ricky Carmichael or a Chad Reed or a Adam Cincerello, like it just happens for them.
Yep.
But they've got it. I don't. I want to know why. You don't need to think about something that you've got if you've always had it.
But being a fan like you are helps in that because there's understanding of how difficult their thing is. I mean, I've worked in other newsrooms, and there's sometimes they've had this default of just tell me, was there a big crash? Can we show the vision of the big crash? And you go, but no, mate, you have to understand what Chad just did, or what what Shane Van Gisbergen just did is enormously special, and you've got to convince them of that. They just want the specky
but they want the burnout at the end that you got to find for.
Correct. Yeah. But
which is understandable as well.
Yeah, I know. But you and I are thinking, because there's a genuine appreciation for what those guys and girls do.
Yeah, and I think because Jason Wygant, so I did the podcast with him in Melbourne, and did you know that he never rode a bike ever? Never rode a bike.
That's crazy, mate.
Until he worked at Racer X.
That's mate. So the fact that he's just had this infectious enthusiasm for it.
He's like the 40-year-old virgin of motocross.
I love that.
It's like we're talking about it. I've known him for years and years, and I always I'd hear from Davey Coombs.
Yarn.
Oh mate, I'd hear from Davey Coombs and West dude, Wygant has the craziest story. And the day I started the podcast, I'm definitely getting Wygant to come on it. And I had such a great relationship with him in America. That's good. We've had a lot of beers together, but I never really went super deep into his story. But he didn't have a bike. You know how he got into motorcycles?
Go.
His dad was the inventory manager at fucking Bellray, who didn't ride, did nothing, had no interest in motorcycling at all.
Yep.
So Weege would get all the magazines. And he just read every single cover to cover.
Love it.
And he wasn't allowed. His parents got him a quad because two wheels was too dangerous.
Yep.
And then he was just obsessed. He knew every single rider. He would volunteer at events. He'd go and watch racing. And it blew my mind. But he's one of the best dudes in the game. I think he's the best motocross reporter in the world.
I love that story. We get to chat to some of the great stars of the game, but here's someone with an equal level of passion who's been immersed in books and history and whatever, it may be more, and look at the career he's carved for himself, mate.
Yeah, it's super interesting, and I think that those kind of people, and it's you were a similar story, just growing up, going to the races, and it takes that hardcore passion to want to do the kinds of things that you guys do, because it's almost they say you should be seen and not heard. It's almost you guys should be heard but not seen in a way.
Yep.
But there is these crazy stories of just pure passion and love, because that's what it takes to do what
mate.
You do.
That's the ingredient. I think if it's not in your heart, you can, there are plenty of people who've faked it to a point that have in all kinds of sport or media. But I reckon that's true of anything. If you in your heart of hearts don't have a proper love and invariably a long held love for whatever it is, I reckon people sense that. I reckon people can either in an instant on television and certainly in a conversation like this, they figure that out, mate. People know that you're not genuine about it, and I've always just tried to keep it in perspective. I love it. I've always loved it, so I'm a bit of a fan. But I try and use the skills that over 20 plus years, from the listening, from the whatever it might be, audience reaction. Sometimes it's a thread on socials, whatever it is. Bring all of that stuff to the table, and either in your 2.5 minute window, if you've got an interview on television, or a couple of hours in a podcast, try and tackle that.
Have you felt the change in those 25 years?
100%.
What's changed? I mean, I'm sure a lot, but what have been the big changes?
I covered Targa, Tasmania one year, and I walked into this TV station in Tassie. I can't remember, it might have been Launceston. And as I walk through, I'm going through this rabbit warren to get to the newsroom to send via tape some stuff back to Sydney. And there's this massive reel-to-reel machine. It's going...
Wow.
And the guy touring through says to me, "Don't bump that, mate." And I said, "Why is that?" He goes, "That's the late night movie kind of thing. It's rolling, like it's on air now. Don't bump it." So technically, things have changed massively. When I first started, everything was on tape.
Yeah.
Radio, I went through the transition where it went from tape to digital, and that was amazing, because then you could do stuff so much faster, so much quicker. And TV, I can remember editors pulling their hair out because everything was tape to tape and how they had to go about it. Now, I mean, you can do it on your laptop. The rate of change in the 20 plus years that I've been doing it has...
So it's just a crazy curve.
Huge, and it's constant. You mentioned cameras and quality of vision and graphics and some of the stuff that that just keeps evolving, mate. It just doesn't stop. The guys that at Supercars, particularly the head of television there and some of the key people, they do an amazing job at embracing new technologies, looking at new ways the onboards can be used to constantly, Bathurst in particular, constantly change it up. How can we keep, so the rate of change in that 20 years has been huge. The personal growth has because of the different jobs I've done. I reckon there's still something, as I sit here and chat to you now, that will have come from my radio days, or there's things that serve you well, and you don't stop learning. I've walked out of the broadcast at OzX, and I've thought about stuff. Okay, maybe we could have done that a little bit differently, or nothing bad, but you always look for ways to keep changing it up in some ways.
Yeah, I struggle with, not struggle, but I always think about we're in like such a weird zone of where people always see us through a window.
Yep.
And it's a very, like, that's the window. That's the window people see you through. They don't see you walk through the door. They don't see that somebody cut you off on the way here, or you nearly had some chick run into you at a super, like, it's just a very, very small window, and trying to like...
But still, they can look at me now, and in an answer that I give you in a heartbeat, they can figure out whether I'm real or into this.
That's true.
And for you and I, when you get to that point where you figure out just be you, and I think that connection then just happens through this, through that. It doesn't. You don't have to be, the biggest star on the planet. That's great for those guys, but there's absolutely a space.
It'd come with too much bullshit, wouldn't it?
There'd be stuff that would drive you mad. There's certainly stuff that would drive you mad. I just think the realness in that connection is very important, mate.
Yeah. Important. No, I 100% agree. I think it's interesting the way that you put something out and you can't control people's perceptions of you, and that, like, all you can do is be yourself. But especially when I meet people that listen to the podcast, especially people that have listened to, like, there's over 3,000, or there'd be 3,000 hours of this podcast up. And it's like, you can't control people's perceptions, whether they
overthink it or over...
maybe like trying to think you're better than you are, even, or people that think, like, it's such like a weird thing. And to do what you've done for 25 years, you've obviously been able to get your head around that whole that whole thing.
It is weird for me to sit here on this side and take
Oh,
questions,
I bet.
right, mate? I don't.
100%.
I reckon I can on one hand think of the amount of times that's happened. I get I'm okay talking about it now because we're getting on good here, but I typically have felt uncomfortable about that because I default to the position of, no, it's not about me, it's about the sports person, it's about the whatever, and I try and always be in that frame of mind. But invariably when the podcast happens, a few people say, oh, mate, I'd love to know more about your story.
100%.
And you typically, as you do so well, mate, you weave little yarns in about stuff you've done or whatever, which over those, what are you up to now? How many episodes?
110 or something.
110.
Yeah.
You gradually let people know more about you, and that's the difference. It's not an interview, it's a conversation. And if we were having a Corona now, that's how the conversation would be, wouldn't it? You'd share a bit of yourself, but you'd still want to know about what the athlete has to say, and that's why it's great.
Well, that's what's interesting with you, and that's why I wondered even before if like you feel like there is the tide shifting in a way to where it's like people would like to know more about you. Like I'm more interested in you personally than the guests that you've had on because I know what it takes to run a podcast.
Yeah.
I've been around a lot of TV presenter. It's fucking interesting. Like the stuff and to do it for so long and to do it so well for so long, that there is people that are genuinely interested in it. And I think that, the podcast medium is like it's
great vehicle for that, pardon the pun. It's a great vehicle for that.
sure.
Yeah,
because you're the host of the show. It's your show. And a friend of mine, Luke Kidgel, he's come on the podcast. He's a young comedian and he's got a huge following and he does 4 podcasts with another comedian and he's just an insane following. They sell out live shows all around Australia.
Yeah.
And he said to me the other day, he's like, you've got to realise that if you've got an audience that builds every single month, then those people are coming to you for you as much as the guests, if not more.
Yep.
And it would be weird for you because I feel like we do a similar thing in terms of when I was doing the film work. Like, again, it's like no one's really there to watch you. Like you're the thing that you're the vessel. You're delivering
to deliver it. Yeah,
but. Now with the way that this whole thing works is like people do want to hear from you and I'm interested in you as a person. I don't want to sit here and be like, well, what was this person like? What was this person like? I want to know what you're like. And that is a weird thing, isn't it?
And I reckon it's percentages too. So you learn with the podcast to maybe more than I've done in the past, share a bit more of who I am and what I do, but I still come back to the subject matter is you, the guest, whoever you're talking to. But to make the conversation flow, you need a few of those things, and that just happens. I don't think I sit back and go,
I'm going to talk about
I'll talk about that, and then all I've always loved conversations. I've always enjoyed that side of it. So to think that you can do something now that people enjoy that is based around that, and some of them have happened where I've almost gone in without a note. I wouldn't say, you said to me today, I text you, my old school
I wondered if that's how you would be.
And hey, what are we going to talk about? But some of the best ones have happened where it's just conversation. There's key things I'll remember from incidents with them or stuff someone's told me about or whatever. You bring all those things to the table, but sometimes it's better to almost shut that laptop that's got bullet points on it or whatever and just go with the flavour of the conversation.
Yeah, I go back and forward with that because there's been some podcasts where I've had like a
prompter.
No, I've never had any at all, but I've gone away and I'm like, fuck.
Didn't ask that.
I meant to ask that. But then it's one of those scenes, and I know I've even thought about doing another podcast that is like super produced, almost like a podcast version of the films that I used to make, where it's just full on, like amazingly produced with great scored music. And maybe that's something I'll do, but it's just this thing turned into this thing, and it's like I just don't have I looked at your Wikipedia page for a couple of minutes to make sure I wasn't missing,
it's got someone's had some fun with that. My middle name
Really?
is not Charles. So
Dude, that's what I was gonna say.
Someone has put Gregory Charles. My middle name is not Charles.
That's going in the title of this podcast. Gregory Charles Russ.
That's it. So someone's had some fun.
Yeah, it's such a strange thing to then to have people then want to hear about your story, and I'm assuming that it's gonna happen more and more because you are driving this thing that people are now following, and it's interesting to say that you do feel uncomfortable with it. I think it's a natural thing, and it's like hard to let go of, right?
Yeah, definitely. And but if it happens just through conversation, I'm cool with that. You try and not overthink this stuff and just get eye contact, listening, and just whatever happens in the discussion happens.
So are you recording them mostly yourself?
Largely, and I try and do them. I've done a few in studio like this. I do like that. I did Shane Jacobson, the actor, in studio. No, beg your pardon, I didn't. I did him. On location. Merrick Watts, the radio guy. He and I were in studio.
American Rosso.
Yeah, correct. Yes, so he and I were in studio. I try where I can to go on location just for a bit of atmos, for a bit of you're at the racetrack, you're at the workshop, you're at the wherever. I did one in a cafe to begin with, and then we ended up going. It was going for so long, we ended up going to his house and finishing the conversation there, which was great. Yeah. And the producer sort of said to me later, the cafe didn't kind of work because it's got all this noise in the background, but part of me doesn't mind that because it's like you were at the cafe with me, and that's often where people meet and have a chat about stuff, So
it becomes very vicarious or voyeuristic.
Well, what's going on in the background there? Who's eating, eggs Benedict or whatever the heck they're having? But wherever the guest is going to be most comfortable, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the other cool things about the medium is like it just doesn't feel like there is any rules with it. And are you having fun with that side of it?
Like you would not believe.
Okay, yeah.
That and it's a really small team of people. So I've got a really good producer, a great audio engineer. One's in Sydney, one's in Melbourne. It's largely me that drives the teeing up of the interviews, the gathering the material, and as I say, we don't really edit them very much, if at all.
Yep.
And the beauty of that small scenario I really like, mate. I like sitting back and thinking about what we're going to talk about in the conversation, but finding that guest and who we're going to try and get next and all that sort of stuff, and just people that you'd ideally like to chat with.
Yeah, it does. But I often say it's a very selfish endeavor. Like I selfishly want to talk to you. Like no, you know what I mean? No one's said to me like you need to get Greg Rust on the show. Like there's
That's good. I'm glad no one's done that.
But in terms of there's no producer, there's no we don't have like a mutual management. It's very, very selfish. And I'm like, I like this guy. I would like to talk to this
private
person.
Message on Instagram. Are you going to be on the Gold Coast? Bang. Yeah, perfect.
And I think it's a very cool it's like so underproduced in a way. It kind of feels a bit Wild Wild West.
Don't you reckon
almost.
That's why the audience likes it too?
100%.
Because if there's a time and place for that sort of stuff. Something beautifully crafted, edited that you've shot with a helicopter and an amazing lens and all that. There's an absolute place for that sort of stuff. But removing the barriers to that and just letting in the growth of the whole thing, I've had conversations about, is it too long? Is it too short? What's the right duration? Does there need to be a set duration? I mean, if I came in today and you and I spoke for 50 minutes and I walked out, so be it. But if your next guest spoke for 2 hours and the key thing, I reckon, and I've had a bit of this too, when they go through the metrics, the people hold. They listen, and our feedback thing, prompt is at the very end of the podcast, and we get heaps of stuff. Hey mate, what about so and so, and so that means people are listening right the way through. And I, if they dropped off halfway through, that's their choice. I got no drama with that. But the fact that it's long form in a ridiculously bite-sized media world that we operate in, and people are with you for the ride, I think that's great.
I like the 3 hour thing because I think it's a fucking test. Like it actually is quite hard to talk.
You must peel back the layers, man, when you get to that sort of level.
You have to, like you just you can't do the idle chit chat thing. And there's times that it's real hard. Then there's some where I'm like looking at the clock, but I want to give, and I think people know it goes for, I do the 3 hours a lot of time, and I think some people with scheduling, and sometimes my scheduling, it'll be like, all right, 2.5 hours, I have to go or they have to go.
Yeah.
But I really think, and people say to me as well, they're like, oh yeah, like, you know, you can see the phases of the way that
conversation goes.
Yeah, and you're like, fuck, it's getting, you know, or they push through that bit, and then you find a new topic and it's like, oh, we can go in on there. It's work, but I think it feels like a worthwhile pursuit.
Definitely.
Because if we're at an airport and we're at the Virgin Lounge and we're talking, then it's like the combo goes flat for a second. It's like pull out your phone and you're being prompted for topics, or that there's information coming in. Yeah. It's like you do this and it's like this is all that exists.
It's just
like,
a chat.
We got to dig deep. You've got to figure out a way to talk to people, a way to resonate, and a way to connect. And I think it's honestly helped my day-to-day life.
That's good. I mean, you know, all of those things from eye contact and body language, and I'm big on body language, you know, reading. You can absolutely feel a scenario with a guest if they're, you know, venturing into territory where they're a little uncomfortable or whether they are opening up. And sometimes just sitting back and letting them have their space with which to open up. You just got to read that, you know, you got to feel that. And you know, I did a couple for Fox Sports for Supercars in 2017 that were long form interviews, and the editors kept ringing me going, man, there's some gold here that we're having to cut out, you know, and that's immensely satisfying when you think that the conversation just flowed for 20 minutes and sadly they could only get 13 out of it, or whatever it might have been, two segments. But no notes, just sitting there shooting the breeze, you know, in a studio on a lounge or whatever. And
have you had any that have been like quite profound for you that have had like a lasting impact?
Yeah, I mean, I had to talk to Marcus Ambrose when he made the very difficult decision to stop racing.
Yeah,
so he'd come back from America. He'd been 12 months prior to that. Roger Penske had sounded him out about would he drive for him in Australia if he was thinking about moving home. And you know, Roger was acutely aware of the success that Marcus had here before he went to NASCAR. And on a handshake 12 months prior, Marcus said, yeah, absolutely. So then come the end of 2014, when he's thinking about coming back to Australia, and he's exhausted. He's, you know, the schedule for NASCAR over the decade or so that he did it was massive, way more than it is in supercars here.
Yeah.
And he was knackered, mate. I think looking back on it with hindsight, he probably felt like that would have been a good time to stop.
Yeah.
But he felt very compelled because he'd told Roger Penske 12 months prior, yes, I will drive for you. Roger had announced he was coming into supercars in Australia, and so Marcus did a race at Sydney Olympic Park. He then did the Adelaide 500 and then the Grand Prix in Melbourne. So went end of 2014, beginning of 15. At Adelaide, he actually got the car in the top 10 shootout, and we thought, man, he's back. He's back. On here. Mega. Yeah. Sydney wasn't great.
Because it was a new car, right? Yeah. Like a new team, new car, new everything.
But a lot of established people in there that were very experienced, and so when it wasn't it was going through as a team, was going through like a growth rebuild, whatever you want to call it. But you know, the cars Marcus had driven for the past decade were enormously different machines.
Yeah.
The supercars that he was coming back to were different to what he raced when he was at the height or the peak of his powers. Yeah, a lot of sense, right? So, you know, within effectively a handful of races, being back driving for the automotive icon in Roger Penske, he goes from being at the forefront of their push into supercars and into Australia, being at the, you know, the spearhead of that, to having to make the difficult decision to say, no, I'm going to stop.
Yeah, so he would have felt like the weight of that whole program on him.
So he made the announcement in his home state of Tasmania. He didn't do the Tasmanian round that weekend in 2015, and so I had to go and interview him and talk about it. And you know, when you're in that moment, you realise the gravity of it. I mean, here's a guy that was incredible, I think, when he didn't win a Bathurst, but he won 2 championships here. He helped get Ford really back on the map in that period of supercars.
Yeah.
Went and did, as an Australian in NASCAR, some of the most amazing things. Hopefully Scotty McLaughlin will follow in those footsteps one day. But to then see this guy say, no, I'm going to have to tell, or he had told at that point, Roger Penske, that he was pulling the pin, that he was going to stop supercars. Everyone was thinking after Adelaide, this guy's back.
Yeah.
To have that conversation is and I did a podcast with him maybe 12 or 18 months later, where he'd had a bit of time to reflect on lots of stuff. He's got a good balanced take on it all now, but I'm big on the positive, so I like looking back on not how he had to stop and we had to have that conversation, but what he achieved in the middle. What he did when he first came back. His
contribution.
His contribution was huge. He came back from a stint in Europe with not a lot of money in his back pocket, and he opened doors and was immediately successful in supercars here. Bravely, at the height of the curve for him, said, I'm off, I'm going to have a crack at America, and more or less on a whim rolled the dice, and away he went and made a 10-year career
no guarantees.
No guarantees at all. There were various programs that Ford had. They had a real push for diversity back then, and there were Ford Australia were sort of assisting to join dots and what have you. But mate, it was a massive roll of the dice, and he had effectively a 10-year career in the United States and did some very, very good things. He said he would love to have, won on an oval and won a championship and things, but he won on road courses and did some. He in a tough club. It's a difficult club, to garner the respect of the key guys. That shows you how good the bloke was.
Yeah, so that was one that definitely stayed with you.
That's one that stood out. Bathurst podiums when it's. I know Greg Murphy pretty well. He my wife and I met each other through him.
Oh, cool.
So he.
That one's always got to stay a bit of a highlight, right?
Yeah, so he's we're very different human beings, he and I, but we get on like a house on fire. And in 03 and 04, I got to do the podium stuff at the mountain where he was winning with Kmart Racing and things like that. So there's been highs and lows. There's been some good things. He when he did what the sport affectionately knows as the lap of the gods, the lap times they do at Bathurst now are faster than this. They're amazing. But for the time, he was the first person to break into the 2-minute sixes. Now they're well down underneath that. But he broke into the 2-minute 6, and everyone was like, "Holy smoke!"
That's like the 4-minute mile kind of deal.
You got it. And when he came back into pit lane, the reception he got from rivals and constituents. People came out of the pit garages to congratulate him, and
that's unreal.
And he got on the roof and he celebrated. And when he stepped down from the roof, I was one of the I was there to ask the question, mate. So there are things like that stick in your mind that you are very proud of, that you cherish. Same as we've been discussing here. Some of them are heartbreaking moments. You empathise in those moments and try and let them come forth. I did a TV interview with Reedy in Melbourne for Marvel Stadium, and he broke down. He got really upset about the fact that he was announcing the end of his kind of full-time career and what he was endeavouring to do moving forward. And I can recall, mate, I did. In the late 90s and 2000, I worked on the Supercross Masters with the guy who was sort of the forerunner to, the boys at AME who does such an amazing job now. He was kind of the godfather, a guy called Phil Christensen.
Yep.
And back then, Andrew McFarlane, Craig Anderson, Chad Reed, I was there, and I can recall Michael Byrne, mate. Yeah, absolutely. I can very vividly recall Reedy arriving on the scene and
250 class
and wanting to win straight away, and just realizing that there was some great talent around then, but realizing he was pretty special, but to embark on what he did, same sort of deal, took the punt, went overseas, and so then to all these years later, what are we now, 2019, as you and I sit here, and then to have that heartfelt conversation with him where he tells everyone that he's eventually going to stop doing that full time. But I was really pleased that the counterbalance and all that, the other little positive in the conversation was that he's not going cold turkey, that he's going to do some four-wheel racing as well, and he's taken to that like a duck to water.
Yeah, he's killing it.
Yeah, he's killing it. So I like those conversations.
It's really cool to think though that like a guy like you has been there doing it for so long and has stayed so relevant that you can have that relationship with Chad because you've interviewed him at Boondall or in Sydney for the Supercross Masters, and then it was like you were there asking him what it's going to be like to move to America, and then 20 years later or 15 years later or whatever the number is, it's like you're there again. There's got to be something very like that only you could get out a certain reaction, or maybe his ability to even get emotional is tied to the fact that he knew that you'd seen him on both ends.
I reckon it's both. I reckon he knows that you can acutely remember that stuff. As I've said a couple of times, I default to the respect for the athlete. So there's definitely something in that. How the longevity has happened, I don't really know, and I'm in the back of my head. I think I'm going to be 50 next year. How long will it keep going? I don't know. I'm going to keep doing it as long as I love it.
Well, the thing with the podcast is you're the boss of that whole deal.
Correct. And I still, whether it's traditional broadcasting or new stuff like that, I still really enjoy it. And I think that history is still important. The fact that Wygant has had all that time reading those magazines and then got to know all the riders and got to know the community, and that
there's something there,
absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Then Lee Diffie, he's immensely good at two wheels, four wheels, all those relationships around the globe. That they're in addition to what you do on air.
Yeah,
that stuff behind the scenes, I think, works. Helps you too. And there's a bit of respect. Afterwards we might go out and have a beer, and what you chat about then is what stays at the pub.
Yeah. Is the Chad podcast out yet?
Not yet. It's I have a Christmas one which will be a bit of fun with a guy called Billy Woods, who was the head guy of 10 Motorsport for many years. So we're sort of reminiscing a little bit there and telling some untold stories about some funny stuff behind the scenes at 10, working with Barry Sheen and others back in the day. And then Chad's coming out about mid-January, and that's an interesting one. And you've already beat me to it, mate. But I have effectively recorded it in two parts because I started doing it at AusX Open Sydney last year.
Oh wow!
We went to New Zealand. We both got crazy busy. We couldn't finish it, and we finished it in Melbourne 12 months later.
That's really cool.
But the beauty is a lot's happened in that 12 months.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, we've both pleased we've been able to eventually finish that off, and having known him all that time since the Supercross Masters days, and to know now that even in the other part of my world that he's venturing into four wheels, and as you said before, is just absolutely killing it, doing an amazing job, and that will be our continued conversation, as he moves forward.
Yeah, how was the experience of doing the podcast with Chad? Because he's a really good guy.
I've got respect for him on a number of different levels. Firstly, I can vividly recall he and Berner and others coming back for Andrew McFarlane's funeral. So I remember going to the
funeral.
You
there?
Yeah, mate, I was
okay.
there. And I stay in touch a little bit with on socials. So I can recall that, and I know from that moment, that the depth of friendship, the buddies, how important all that stuff is, in addition to all the success that's come from there. Some people have not fully understood, how he's got a bit of an accent and things, but I got it straight away with Chad. He connected. He endeared himself to the American audience with that, and it changed. The bloke didn't make the bloke any different.
No.
It just, even Lee, when he commentates in the States now, he still has a very much an Australian accent. That hasn't changed.
And he's shaped his vernacular a little bit,
zeros and you use terms of phrase that you wouldn't, and so I absolutely got why Chad did that. I didn't think for a moment that he'd forgotten his roots. But, I mean, now he's lived in America, I think, longer than he ever lived in Australia. Crazy. Yeah.
That was one thing. It was funny that with Chad, me and him had a bit of a tested relationship. We never...
Has that simmered with time? What changed? Why?
Well, I never really spoke to the dude. But there was a lot of stuff going on around us that was like kind of making us not really come together. And the times that we did have interactions, I got weird vibes from him. I had my own bias going into those interactions, and it wasn't actually until mutual friends were just like, dude, you guys are just homies waiting to happen, and there's like, you got to sit down. The first conversation,
when did that change? What happened?
I did the podcast.
Okay.
I'd never really had a conversation with Chad previous to doing the podcast, like very, very surface level encounters. Like, so actually the last time I even really hung out with him was I got him into the Red Bull party at Austin MotoGP.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, and he was a monster. That's when he was still a monster athlete. That was like one of the most. It was weird too. It was me, him, Lance Armstrong, and Ricky Fowler, and we were all just sort of shooting the shit. But I just was sort of trying.
What a combo, mate! That's a mega podcast in itself. Oh my god,
it was a weird day, that one. But I sort of just was chilling, having a few drinks. I'd had a pretty big night the night before. But that was funny. I think that whole thing of like, I went downstairs and like took some passes and got him upstairs. I think that was like the first little icebreaker.
Yeah, cool.
And then Jeremy from Red Bull, who was the guy that sort of was instrumental in all of this even starting, he pushed pretty hard to get it done. And then one of my best friends, Sam Moore, pushed really hard. And we sat down and I opened the podcast and saying like, hey, this is why I think we haven't been, like, this was my bias towards you. And it's like, I'm excited now to actually chat and get to know you. But that was, I wish I knew him when I was over there, because I always struggled. Like, I never let go of Australia.
Okay.
And I think that really hampered my development just personally and career-wise over there. I just had an Aussie flag fucking
through and
just
through
in the ground everywhere I went.
Yeah.
Every conversation, I never let go of it, because I honestly, like, you'd see the way that people would talk about Chad and like, he just doesn't like Australia, he's fucked us off.
That's not true. Absolutely not true.
And it isn't. And I learned it. And he said, it was at the very end of the podcast, and he just floored me, and I was like, dude, I wish I knew you. I wish I knew you over there. He said, like, when I got there, I had to commit fully. He said, I love Australia more than anybody else. I love my hometown.
How good
I love that.
But he recognised that, mate, and the fact that he did that.
That's so wise.
But yeah, and if that's the takeout piece of advice for the next young kid that's going to try and do that sort of stuff, I mean, you've got to immerse yourself in that and still be an identity, still be you. But if it takes a bit of that to get that connection with American fans and so on, so be it.
Well, it's not even the fans as much as it's just to get through day-to-day life. Because to me, America was never as good as Australia. America could never do anything right in terms of and it was almost out of like...
you look back on it so fondly,
Oh,
mate,
yeah, I do. Because I've realised now that all that I was doing is I had insecurities around people thinking that I did the Chad Reed thing. But that's not what he was doing. He lasted so long there, the most successful Australian ever, because he probably was the only guy that was man enough to go, no, I'm going to be an American while I'm here. This is the key to longevity, because if I'm distracted by missing home and worrying about what my friends are doing and what my family's doing and what people think of me and blah, 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 then I'll never make it.
Yep.
And no one ever made it to the extent that he did.
Mega career, mate. Mega achievement. And it's... I love the fact that in those conversations with people, when they roll the dice like that and they have a crack and they go overseas, Ambrose for 10 years, Chad for nearly 20, whatever it was, to let go of everything at home, which is so easy. You know, you're here on the GC, you can bolt down the road and you know everyone, and meant to, you know, to figure out yourself financially over there, to make friends, and you know all of that stuff, which just weighs on you the entire time, and then to come through that and have the careers that those guys have had, really impressive.
And I almost looked at the whole Chad thing as like, well, it's easy for him.
Not at all.
He's got money, he's got this, he's got that. That's the way that I looked at it. And I was like, no, like you should be able to hold on to the Aussie. Like if I can do it, you can do it. Like you've got it easier, but it's not the case at all. Like the money that they were making, the pressure that he was under, the people that are grabbing for their attention and for the money, and they want to be around the fame, they want to be in that scene. Like there's so much to navigate. And as a young kid, without his dad, without, you know, not even contact really with his parents for, you know, some of that time, and it's just like
20 years.
It's crazy.
20 years, yeah.
It's
and it's a great story actually. It's a story that goes beyond you and I that love motorsport. It's actually a story a lot of Australians I think should hear more of.
And it was quite striking when that podcast come out that how many people messaged me and said like, oh, I'm actually a Chad fan. I've wasted years not liking Chad.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
A lot of people.
Therein lies, again, another benefit of the podcast. That's something I get a bit of too, is that you changed my view, you know, or that long form conversation finally enables them to feel a bit more of their personality, or instead of it being a heat of the moment, 1 minute reaction to something that happened in the race, and you form your view in 1 minute about whether they're a good person or whether they're an arsehole. Instead, our long form chat actually lets people know a bit more of their personality, and I do get a bit of that. You know, it's changed my view. That's something that crops up occasionally too.
And you know what I've tried to encourage people to do now through the platform, and that do have that way of thinking. I've challenged myself to think like this. I want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt that I don't like right now. If that I think like, I'm not a big fan, I want to think, I actively think like, well, imagine if I'd already done a podcast with him and it was already super illuminating and there was already, he changed my mind. I want to live like that now. I want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt that if I could sit down with them for 3 hours, I would come away being very appreciative of that person, and have like a sense of reverence for what they've achieved and what they've been through. And that's not just athletes, that's every person. Because
mate, it's just balance, isn't it? You know, that's one of the things I always strive for. I mean, that you could still walk into it with maybe a bit of pre-formed judgment, but the fact that you're prepared to let yourself be open to what happens in this conversation and therefore might shift your viewpoint, that's good. That's what it should deliver, I think.
But we don't that's not the
in life.
Yeah, in life, that's not the way that we walk around as people, because I think that
we've formed our view based on a headline or based on a whatever, and yeah.
And I think even deeper than that as well, there's like a certain survival element. I think when you go like even deeper, like it sort of is, at the end of the day, like we live in a great society and we've got a lot of choice, and we even that to contemplate the idea of liking or not liking somebody. Like there's people in the world right now that don't have drinking water, and that's what they care about. Like they don't care if somebody's lost his accent. Like they actually couldn't give a fuck, because they've just got to survive. So it's like, I think the perspective that we live in such a blessed time to even pass judgment on somebody. It's like, okay, let's strip this back a little bit. Like we only even have this luxury because of how amazing our lives are. So do we really want to waste this amazing life? And the fact that we've got time to judge people doesn't mean we should. No.
And when we've travelled with the kids, gone to all sorts of different places with them, but you know, from them seeing a homeless person in San Francisco to families in one of the islands in Thailand struggling, you know, that's been a great perspective thing for them. I can vividly recall Sarah took, when we went to base camp, she took just a simple packet of balloons So what are you doing that for? And she gave these kids that looked like they had lived in, you know, these same clothes for years, their whole life. You know, this little colourful balloon that they would blow up just meant their whole world. They weren't affected by any of that other stuff. That tiny little thing made a real significant difference. You know, it's important that you have a bit of that in your life. That you get a bit of in all this crazy shit we're doing. You got to actually stop and what's the most, you know, bit of reality, a bit of perspective.
Yeah. What was that base camp experience like? That's
amazing.
That's on my bucket list.
So we went. What are we? As you and I sit here now, I would nearly have left at about this time of year because I could only fit it in around my racing program.
Yeah.
And you know, the broadcasting had wrapped up for the year and the like. No. And so
Greg Russ, ladies and gentlemen.
No. So I flew into Kathmandu. She was already there ahead of me. She'd gone with a girlfriend and this girl's sister, and they'd done a few things in Kathmandu. She knew Nepal a little bit already. She'd been there, and then she and I set off. We had a couple of days in Kathmandu to get to the starting point of the trek. A lot of people go. You fly a small plane into one of the most dangerous airports in the world. It's a little place called Lukla. So I got in this plane. First few days it was all fogged in, so we couldn't take off. Sat at Kathmandu airport for ages. And then suddenly there's this commotion of, okay, quick. The weather's right. We can go now. We can get the plane in. Off we go. And the runway at Lukla kind of juts out a little bit from the edge of a cliff face.
Imagine.
And you come in, you know, it was like a scene out of Indiana Jones. You know, we're in this old plane. There's dudes up the front with, you know, wayfarers and leather jackets on, and you know, chooks up the back of the plane and whatever. Anyway, so the plane lands. It's full brakes, turn. Everyone's kind of screaming, "Get out, quick!" Because we have to get the next passengers on before the weather changes and get it out again. And you start your trek at Lukla, which is...
How many thousand feet would that be?
I reckon it's 2,750 or thereabouts.
Yep.
And you trek to 5.5, I think is base. No, that might be meters. We're talking. You asked in feet.
Sorry.
I think that might be meters.
So that's 15,000 feet.
Yeah,
roughly.
Yeah. So the faster you go, the more dangerous it is from an altitude sickness point of view. You're better off acclimatizing. So even trekking, even just to base camp, you still got to, you know, go from one village to another, and then the next day you sort of camp at the village, but you go up a bit, then come down, and you keep doing that to acclimatize.
Okay. Did you have problems with the altitude?
Within 1 day of getting to the final stop before base camp, I can recall, mate, walking along, and I looked down at my feet, and I thought, shit, what is controlling that? They're just moving. They're moving forward. What the hell is going on here? And Sarah had massive headaches.
Yeah, okay.
And the guide we had was excellent. We kept in touch with him a little bit too, which is quite
awesome.
cool. And anyway, the guide recognised that, and they gave us some stuff which I think is called Dimox, and makes you piss like a racehorse basically. But it helps abate the symptoms of altitude sickness for a bit. And so we were able to continue into base camp to see it, and then the key thing is to get down. So the faster you come down, the better it is for your body and so on. So it was about, from Lukla to base camp, it was about, I want to say 10 or 11 days, and then it was 3 days down. Okay. Basically. So we carried our own packs. We didn't make it. Some people use Sherpas and porters and stuff. Sarah was big on experience, you know, that Sir Edmund Hillary, who as you know did some amazing things in Nepal. There was lots of places that you went to where he'd helped schools and kids and stuff, so it was a very eye-opening thing for me. I'd never been to a country like that before. Some funny stuff that went down, mate. You know, we were trekking along, and the guide said, "Oh, do you need any money?" We're in the middle of nowhere, and I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Oh, this guy coming up the hill here, he's from the bank, and that guy with him is a security guy. There's a guy with a gun, you know, like we're in the middle of nowhere."
And this is cashed up.
Had cash, he wanted to make a withdrawal kind of thing. There was that.
Sherpa ATM.
But lots of very grounding things, something that I'd never really done before.
Was it hard? Like
it was
challenging?
It was, and it's a little bit random in the sense that you could my experience at least anyway, you could be the fittest cat ever, or you could have a very average level of fitness. Oh, well, it wasn't too bad, but altitude sickness seems to be a bit of a random thing.
Very, very personal, like subjective kind of thing.
But the overriding element, as we were trekking, the guide's brother-in-law was a guide for another person, and they were powering, and he said, he's trying to get there in however many days, way too quick. And then sure enough, within days we saw him coming down with ambos. He was okay, but he'd gone too fast. So you just have to plod, acclimatise. It's a great bit of reflection for there's, you learn a bit about yourself, mate, about what you're made of. As I said before, I'm a bit sort of soft as marshmallow. I'm not as your girlfriend's there and she's a great support for you and the like, but you fundamentally just have to get going. Do yourself. And then it's 5.5 at base camp, but it's I think 8.8 or something at the summit. And to just massive respect for those guys. I've read a lot of books since then on mountaineers and what they do, and mate, I don't profess to. I'm not a freaking mountaineer by any stretch of the imagination, but it's captivating reading, I think, and knowing how much it changes even from base camp to the summit. It's Anyway, the from about day 2, I think, as you're trekking along, Everest is always in sight. And so it's like this beacon that you're working towards, and
there's like a gravity sort of.
And it's an amazing mountain. It really is.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so it was a great experience.
What was it like doing it with your wife?
It was good. You kind of learnt a bit about each other, more than you had before. She's got great strength, mate. She's a very strong-willed person. Which is good. You used yin and yang before, So, and she knew what to expect. She'd done another trek in the Himalaya called the Annapurna Circuit.
Yep.
So she knew a bit about what that stuff was like, and just how to prep for it, and it's good.
What did you take out of it personally, like in terms of the, you said you learned a bit about yourself, like what sort of stuff do you take out of that?
Just to, firstly, knowing how good you got it. Seeing these little kids, and I'd never been to a country like that before, so that was very good. The most eye-opening aspect of it was just about needing to have a bit of a glass of cement sometimes, and just keep plodding, keep trekking along, and then you're not a mountain climber. You make it to base camp. That's great. That's a very, very cool thing. But to go to the summit's next level.
Did you ever get a feeling of like insignificance and that the world kind of doesn't care?
Probably more. As I said before, you don't know how good you got it. You no hotel, no fancy hotel. You're staying in simple locations, and the simplicity of a lot of that stuff, but the immense beauty of the place, and to have done it, all these years later, mate. I mean, it's not quite 20 years, but may as well be. I mean, it's still a thing I'm very proud of. Is
it something like, have you got more of those things that you'd like to achieve over time, or
more places in the world that I'd particularly like to take the kids? I'm big on the kids at the moment and life experience for them, and if they have a dream for something, to help them on the path, but also to teach them about being a bit self-starting with that stuff too. You can't.
Oh, you have to. I preach it to people that ask me for advice. I'm like, you got YouTube, you can figure it out. Like, you cannot baby people. Like, if people say they want something, then they don't need help.
You got to have the hunger for it still, mate. I want the kids to have that opportunity, and we'll do everything we can to assist with that. But I still want them to be hungry. I want them to get out of bed and go, if I'm going to be a YouTuber, well, immerse yourself in that. And my eldest daughter has done a bit of modelling, some courses and things, but she's still very young. But we were in Auckland recently. She expressed an interest in wanting to do it, and I said, okay, well, I'm not going to be I'm not going to be pushy dad here. You know, if you want to do this, you're going to have to go and knock on the door of the agency and talk to some of the people. And she says you've got the inner strength to do that, which I was really pleased about and made a good impression. And so that's the thing I want to instill in them. I want them to have that passion, that hunger. I love what I do, and it wouldn't matter to me what they did so long as they were giving it 11/10 and that they were as passionate about it. I don't want them to, or want for them to do something that just makes up the numbers, mate. I'd rather them do something that they truly cherish or love.
Well, it's got to help the fact that they've watched you walk that path your whole life.
A bit, I suppose, yeah. And you know, they've seen some of the failings in that too. You know, the things that when it hasn't gone, you know, perfectly to plan. You know, they're aware of, I think, in a general media sense, what you are exposed to a little bit. I'm not at a massive level, but you're still exposed to some things, and I think they're mindful of that even in their own world with social media and stuff like that now. So there's probably a good positive from all that. They know that Dad does motor racing and he talks cars. The oldest one joked with me the other day, I think I'm not going to follow you on Instagram anymore because all you do is talk about cars. And we had this ongoing conversation. But yeah, they're proud of what Dad does. Yeah. Yeah,
well, hey mate, we're going to wrap this one up here. I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. It's
fellow martial artist. How about that? That's one of the revelations for me in all this. That's cool.
Honestly, go try jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
And if you want to think about the whole soft marshmallow side, then it's there's no room for that. It'll definitely get that side of you will get tested. But it's been one of the best things that I've done for myself in the last couple of years. The thing with it too, and no disrespect to Taekwondo or any other martial arts, but you can't go full clip in Taekwondo every day. You can't do it like the technique that you get taught, like a front kick to somebody's face. Like you're not applying that technique every day. You can practice that technique, you can drill that technique, but I'm not physically going to class and kicking somebody in the face and doing that technique to 100%.
But you are when you're grappling and you're doing all this other stuff.
You are doing an armbar 100%. Well, I go to the gym and it's war. Like I exercise that. A competition for me is my easiest day of the week in terms of training, because I get to fight people on my same belt, my same weight, my same everything. In the gym, my professor weighs 120 kilos. He's a 4th degree black belt that's been doing jiu-jitsu 22 years. And it's like, I get fucked up. And it's, you know what I mean? So it's like no one at my level, at my weight, can impart that kind of beating on me. So it's like there's something that's so raw and real about jiu-jitsu, and I think that once you experience that as a person that loves martial arts, and you go like, this is the thing, like this is the real thing that we're training for, and then there becomes no illusions about how good you are, if you're improving. Like it's very, very transparent, and it's a super rewarding thing, because you can go from feeling so uncomfortable and so helpless to literally making somebody that they go, that's it, you got me, I'm done. So it's a super, super cool thing, and I think I'd be excited for you to get into it at some point.
Good to experience another art, and well done, mate. Great to cheers to you. Great to have a chat. Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it, and you're welcome whenever you come to the Goldie. And if you want to use the studio at all, just let me know.
Love it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, mate.